Welcome, everyone. I call the May 15th, 2012 Shakopee City Council meeting to order. Kim, could you please take the roll?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Punt?
Here.
Counselor Lehman?
Here.
Counselor Clay?
Here.
Counselor Whiting?
Here.
Mayor Tapke?
Here. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Mr. McNeil.
Mr. Mayor, we will recommend that you delete 4E2, which regards the hiring of a secretary position in the administration department. We'll bring that back in the future.
Any other additions or corrections? I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Clay?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the agenda as modified.
Councilor Lehman?
I'll second it now, speak to it. Questions about 4E. There was a bunch in here that either didn't fulfill the, backgrounds or didn't accept the jobs or whatever, so,
On the table?
yeah, they were on the table. So,
Would you like to move on to item number 4 and remove those?
well, can we just get a quick rundown of, like, the one, I think number 1 was okay to begin with, right?
Yes.
Okay, and number 2 we deleted. Number 3, one position was offered and turned down. Is that number 3?
Number 3 was one that has accepted the offer.
Okay.
So that's ready to be hired, recommendation on that. Number 4 had a police background investigation, which was not completed at the time the pack went out. That has since been completed, and we're recommending a hire on that.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So are there any changes you'd like to make?
Nope.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
You want to read it?
We're gonna read that?
I'm
We're
sorry.
We're jumping around a little.
We
It's
are,
all right.
sorry. Go ahead.
All right, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 4, consent business. Are there any items that would like to be pulled from consent this evening? Councilor Lehman?
I'll move the consent agenda, noting 4E2 has been removed.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Clay. Mr. McNeil, would you please read?
Thank you. 4B1 approves variance to the existing fee structure for Valley Fair, reducing the 2012 fee for fireworks display inspections. 4D1 and 2 adopts resolution accepting bids on the 2012 bituminous and Verlin Drive bituminous overlay projects number 2012-1 and -2 with a 5% contingency for use by the city engineer as needed. 4D3 adopts a resolution accepting bids on the Main Street Utility Improvements Project number 2012-5 with a 5% contingency also for use by the city engineer. 4D4 authorizes repurchase agreements with Ag Powers Enterprises, Inc. for 2011 John Deere mower and a 2010 tractor for a combined price of $13,209.75. 4D5 authorizes the purchase of 2 light trucks from Midway Ford for a combined price of $43,918.96 for use by Public Works staff, and declares 2 trucks as surplus property and authorizes proper disposal. 4D6 authorizes staff to purchase 1 new 2012 Dodge Grand Caravan from Burnsville Dodge for a price of $22,289.85 for the Parks and Rec Department. 4D7 adopts a resolution accepting work on the Bluff Avenue Storm Sewer Project number 2011-4. 4E1 authorizes the hiring of Kimberly Weckman for the secretary position in the Finance Department at Step D of Grade 4 of the 2012 non-union pay plan following successful pre-employment tests and background checks. 4E3 was on the table. That authorizes the hiring of Karen Fiari as the Human Resources Technician position at Step D of Grade 6 of the 2012 non-union pay plan, subject to successful completion of the required pre-employment screenings. 4E4 was also on the table. That authorizes the hiring of Claudia Kastman for the Police Records Technician position at Step E of Grade 3 of the 2012 non-union pay plan, subject to successful completion of the required pre-employment screenings and background checks. 4E5 accepts with regret the resignation of Police Officer Frank Coburn effective May 1st, 2012. 4E6, adopts a resolution of appreciation to Sergeant Bob Forberg on the occasion of his retirement from the police department on May 20th after 22 years of service to the city. 4F1, authorizes bills and pass-throughs to be paid in the amount totaling $1,086,180.22. 4F2, approves minutes of the city council meetings of April 17th and April 24th, 2012. 4F3, approves the application and grants a temporary on-sale liquor license to the Shakopee Lions Club for sales during a softball tournament at Tapa Park, June 1st through 3rd. 4F4, approves applications and grants a wine license and on-sale 3.2 malt liquor license to Tokyo Sushi and Grill Japanese LLC, 8080 Old Carriage Court North, effective July 1st, 2012. 4F5, authorizes the expenditure of $20,000 from the building fund for Phase 2 of interior improvements at City Hall. And 4F6, adopts a resolution appointing Jennifer McAthen to fill an unexpired term on the Police Civil Service Commission through February 28th, 2014.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion on those items? All right, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, item number 5, recognition of involved citizens by City Council. I know we've got a couple folks here to speak tonight, just so we can keep it to 5 minutes maximum. For everybody, there will be no action taken on items that we speak about tonight, but just we're here to listen. So I know folks from Van Buren Street, is that right? You guys want to start? Please introduce yourself and where you live, and clock starts now.
All right. My name's Rob Kramer. I live on 1006 Van Buren Street.
And I'm Trent Stern, live at 1077 Van Buren Street.
Bill Anderson, 1066 Van Buren Street.
And basically, we've come here today as concerned citizens of Van Buren Street between 10th and 11th Avenues. We've expressed interest in repairing our road immediately. I went down to the Public Works Department yesterday in discussion with them to determine what the game plan was, I guess, essentially for repair, what the projected start date was. We're told it was previously set for 2011. It came and went, obviously, and now we're kind of in a position as a street where, I mean, basically, the road itself is eroding away. There's issues on the surface level as well as below, with sewer and septic issues as well that are affecting me personally. So that was kind of my goal. It was to come here and to reach out to our fellow neighbors and get a petition put together in place to try and see what we could do to force some action potentially, and get it in front of the council members and see what we could do to get the ball rolling on that project.
What's going on with sewer?
Myself personally, we have an issue from our septic side to the main sewer line in determining who is at fault necessarily, I guess you could say. There's basically some roots that have come in from both the city side along with my property line, and the only way to determine who is technically at fault is to dig the road. So my thought would be, hey, since we already have a scheduled deconstruction of our road that has passed, what's the sense of me putting out, financially be at risk for repair when this is something that I should have already been assessed, our neighbors should have already been assessed, and frankly needs to be done. So I think it's in our best interest to me, myself, and the city themselves to not go about the work 2 separate times if we can avoid it. If it's something that's already been scheduled and slated, let's just get the job done.
And a point is that there are 2 other neighbors that couldn't make it here tonight that are having that same issue
Okay.
on our block.
So it's not, I guess, a unique situation for me. It's something that we've noticed also in the area as well too. I think there's a couple other streets in the neighborhood who have been affected by these similar issues.
Very good. Councilor Lehman.
Couple of questions, Mayor. One is, you're on septic system?
I'm sorry, city sewer and water,
Okay.
not septic.
All
I
right.
misspoke.
And if I'm understanding this correct, there's 2 other neighbors, so 5 total are basically petitioning the city for this improvement.
We've got a list of 13 neighbors
Okay,
who've signed on.
all right. Can we get a copy of that turned into the city clerk?
Absolutely.
Councilor Clay.
Van Buren between 10th and 11th would have been originally constructed what, 74, 75, 76?
Late 60s.
69.
69, really?
Yeah, I built
He's a
my
rookie.
house in November, I was the first one there in November of 69. It was, already had 5 houses coming
I
from,
thought they only went up to 10th. Well, okay, never mind. Yeah, I shouldn't admit to being old enough to remember that. Is the street scheduled for reconstruction? Sewer and water as well?
Mr. Loney?
Mayor, members of council, in the last few years, council has told us to cut back on, we had to cut the project.
I knew it was
off
going to be
last
our
year.
fault. I just wanted to.
No, we, last year was a pretty big recon project, and we had to, at some point, we had to cut it off. I would agree with the neighbors here. Van Buren is probably one of our worst streets. There's some soil issues in there, because you've all experienced the heaving in the winter,
yeah.
and there's a lot of,
Snowplows have a problem getting through, actually.
Yeah,
We've
and-
had to put out bump signs. The
Yeah.
city's come and put out big bump signs in our front yards so that the plows can be
And-
careful not to.
the sewer system is such that there's a lot of gaps in the joints, and the tree roots are going pretty well rampant in that sewer system. It's a defective system. It needs to be replaced.
We haven't done a lining project in this area?
No.
Okay.
This one, it's the service, the system, the tree roots are so bad, we've been foaming it to keep it at bay, but it really needs to be replaced. If we line our sewer main, they still have the issues with their sewer services. It's not gonna change.
Out to my house 3 times in the past month, and the problem's still not resolved, so. I'm just at a point right now, sorry, I don't know if I need to restate that, but I've had Roto-Rooter out to my place now 3 times within the last month, and the issue still hasn't been resolved. So I'm at a point now where, do I need to either hire the city or hire an independent contractor to come out, remove the road, and assess the damage, make the repair, and cross my fingers that it's not on my dime necessarily.
Right.
I'm fully aware that if we're assessed, yes, I'll have to pay. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. So I want to get some clear direction. I understand it's something that's not done overnight, but it's something that I think we need to get the ball rolling on.
Thank you. Mr. Loney, do we have a plan?
Yes, we do.
Lovely.
Have a plan right in here. We're preparing our capital improvement plan to bring it before council, and, one of the issues we've been talking about, and we'll probably talk more tonight, is how to do funding of street projects, and how to keep them going, because we have 5 areas in town that we're getting other calls too. You're not the only neighborhood, so there's other neighbors in some other blocks that are experiencing problems, and they want to know when their street's going to be done. And it's the sewer and the street that are failing. And so we have some other areas. We'll bring them forward during the we can't do a project, I mean, we wouldn't be able to do your project this year anyway. But, and we'll have to work on your issue separately and see what we can do. We have some ideas, but we'll have to bring this to council, let you know, here are the project areas that we see, and have that discussion of the capital improvement program, where do we go? That's my suggestion right now, and so that these people know what we're doing.
Councilor Lehman?
And just to let you folks know how this works is that if it's a recon where they do the road, the sewer, and the water lines and everything underneath the road, there's an assessment for the residents, and then you're also responsible for the part from your property line to the house for the sewer line that's actually on your property. That's a separate fix, I guess, by a separate contractor. Sometimes you can get the contractor that's doing the street, but you have to do that separately than the street contract, or you get your own guy. So,
All right.
is that accurate process, Mr. Lummy?
Yep, yeah, and, yes, and we would be recommending a total reconstruction of the sewer to the property line, water main to the property line, and new street, so it'd be a total reconstruction. And soil correction in that area, because there is some soil problems.
And then from the property line to their foundation,
To their building, yeah, they would have to correct that.
Yeah, if there's issues there. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so we will be starting the budgeting process here in the next few months for looking at all the projects for the future, and we will definitely take it into consideration, figure out
Keep ours in
how to
mind
get
and keep us
things
informed.
done. well, you guys keep in mind as well that we need a little prodding upon occasion. So that is, we appreciate you coming down.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
And will we have Mr. Loney? You have all their contact information and anything? Is there anything you need from them?
No, I'll
right.
just get their names and.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, anyone else?
Keep that petition.
Should we sign in, make it official?
Yep.
We don't make people sign in anymore.
Really?
Yes, we do.
Up there? I thought over. Okay, just up
Is
there.
this being taken out of my 5 minutes? That's
Every-
what I.
All right, time's up.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately for you, your time started 4 minutes ago.
So my name is Todd Hallett. I live at 7104 Sussex Lane. I've been a resident of Shakopee for 11 years, and many of you probably know my name or know my face. I am president of the Shakopee Youth Hockey Association, and I'm here to do something maybe a little bit different than some of the folks that come up, and I'm here to make a proposal to give the city money. What we'd like is we'd like to make
Twice, would you?
we'd like to make a. And I do understand this is not necessarily proper channels. I've gone through many proper channels and many iterations of the community center and the hockey association and other community involvements. But at a recent hockey board meeting, we agreed unanimously to make an offer to lease the Enigma Center from the city for $10,000 annually. As we all know, we have 450 Shakopee youth hockey players, and that's just the youth hockey players. That doesn't include the high school. I've talked to many of you one-on-one. We all know there's a resource to youth participant ratio that's a little out of whack when it comes to hockey. A dryland facility would go a long ways. And we've looked at areas in Shakopee, private areas, mall areas. 2 years ago, we actually took it to Dakota, and we gave them $27,000 of our parents' money, and again, on top of the $50,000 that we pay for ice. We'd much rather keep that money here. And the Enigma Center is right above the rink. It offers a great ability for all of the players and the parents direct access. We've measured it. It works well for us. We feel like we've been a good partner to the city. We've fundraised. We've asked for help. We've taken the lead on trying to solve parts of the problem before we've asked for help. We've gone through proper channels. We helped on the referendum 2 years ago. There's an area that would work really well for us, and we were willing to pay for it. And we're willing to make it a profit center rather than a loss leader in the community center. We are one of the few associations that are willing to pay for these things. We're one of the few associations that are willing to pay top dollar. We pay over $200,000 for ice every year. We get it, it's expensive, but you have an area that we could really utilize. We also are more than happy to work with the Park and Rec Department. If it's seasonal, just during the hockey season, great, and we can work to move things in and move things out, super. If there's parts that we can make more hockey dryland, another part to get the weight training out of the hallways and up there, and make it almost an expanded fitness area, we'd love to work that. But there's a space in the community center that we think would be a win-win and also generate funds. And this is not intended to be a grandstand in any manner of the word. I know you'll probably be passed down, will probably be passed down, but we feel the Hockey Association, myself, others have just earned the right to ask for a little help here. And I appreciate your consideration.
What is a dryland facility?
Dryland facility is, you'll see it more and more are popping up, basically because second sheets are awfully expensive. It essentially allows hockey very similar to a weight room, but very hockey-specific training. Shooting stations, acceleration ramps, treadmills, hockey treadmills, and all of that would be funded by us. That's already been pre-approved, and we'd also give the high school teams access. So as you know, the high school gets kind of the premier times. They would also get access. So when the varsity girls are on the ice, the varsity boys or the varsity JV could also use that area. So it allows them to get some off-ice training. Our coaches, and with me as our Vice President, Jim Grabanowski, who also chairs our Hockey Development Committee, who will be overseeing this, but it's a full instruction off-ice. It'll allow them probably an extra hour of instruction throughout the season and help, fill the gap between not getting ice.
President Lehman?
What's your vision for the existing teen center?
my vision for that,
Yep.
to make it a dryland facility.
Okay, where would we move the current use to?
That would have to be vetted probably through the Park and Rec Department.
Okay.
But that's a space that, I've asked a handful of people on, how often it's utilized, what they utilize it for, and if it makes money. And that's something I think the Park and Rec Committee and as well as the City Council would have to evaluate.
Okay.
Any questions, Mr. Hallett?
Yeah, I think that they're willing to offer $40,000 a year to lease that facility. We should consider it.
Did he
I'll
say
meet
his
you
name
halfway.
4 times?
20?
I'll meet you halfway.
All right, so will we get
I
this?
think probably refer it to staff and probably it'll go to the Park and Rec Advisory Board for further study. and
Yeah, we're going to need to hear from
recommendation.
Jamie.
Okay, that's a plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak? All right, moving on to item number 6. I will entertain a motion to open a public hearing. Councilor Clay?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to open the public hearing for,
The City Council.
City Council,
the
yes.
City Council.
Oh, should I have the EDA convene first?
Let's do that
No.
first.
No, we can.
Well,
On a
yes.
roll.
I think we probably need to do that. We'll come back.
Do that being.
Recess the City Council meeting.
Then I'll move to recess City Council meeting. No, do we actually need to do that?
I don't care.
Why don't
All
we
right.
let our city attorney
Yeah.
respond?
City Attorney, please.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what you want to do here is keep the city council in session, don't recess.
Right.
And call the EDA to order and take roll.
And then public hearing?
do your public hearings.
All right.
And then when you're done with, you're going to keep the city council in session the whole time. There's no reason to recess at this point. And then when you're done with the EDA, then you're going to recess it to the June 5th meeting and continue that public hearing to the June 5th meeting,
Thank you very much.
so that you don't have to call a special meeting.
So we
Right.
want to open the EDA and immediately then open the public hearing?
Yes.
I would open the EDA, take roll like you normally,
Right.
like you normally have your EDA meeting.
So,
and then
Councilor.
Go into the public hearings that are on the agenda.
And then go back to the City Council to open a public hearing?
Yep.
So, do
I
you,
now hereby open the,
we need you to withdraw your motion first, because we had a
it
motion.
wasn't a second.
Okay, there we go then.
I will open the May 5th, 2012 Economic Development Authority meeting. Would you please make note of the roll?
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you. And I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing for, first, we're going to have 1 or 2 public hearings tonight.
I mean, 2, but just
Two.
do them one at a time. Right?
Motion to open a public hearing.
Motion by Mr. Tapke, seconded by,
Second.
I did it again, by Mr. Whiting, seconded by Mr. Lehman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have opened the public hearing.
City Council.
Now we need a motion to open public hearing for City Council.
Make a motion to open a public hearing for city council.
Second that.
Motion by Councilor Lehman, second by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. The public hearing is open. Sir,
Thank you, members of the council and members of the board. Isn't economic
Is
development
this
fun
substitute
when you get
policy?
to keep track of the process? This first public hearing is for you to consider revisions to the City of Shakopee's business subsidy policy. You have in the packet a copy of the existing business subsidy policy and a clean version of the revised one, and I'll highlight the major changes in the revised one for you. They are found in the wage section, which is at page 2 of the copy marked draft. Item C, wages. One of the major changes following from there is a further set of criteria regarding the kinds of economic development goals that can be used to evaluate requests for business assistance.
Another major change, and this is a change from the draft that was seen by the EDAC after further consultation with Julie Eddington at Kennedy Engraving, is because of a concern about the wage floor, right at C, where wages begins, we've reduced new jobs to be created by the project must pay at least 175% of the federal minimum wage, rather than what we currently have, which is 275%. You'll remember following your action on Sanmar, the concern that you had about that. What that amounts to is that the job wage floor would be about $12.69 an hour under the new standard. And so if the changes look appropriate to you, what we're asking the EDA to do this evening is, by resolution, approve the revised business subsidy policy. That resolution number for the EDA is 12-6, and for the City Council to approve Resolution 7187, also approving the revised business subsidy policy. Of course, you'll ask if there's any public comment on the revision before taking those actions. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Leek? Councilor Whiting.
Mr. Leek, when this proposal of policy was put together, the minimum wage was $5.15 an hour, and 275% of that would be the $14.16 an hour. Now we're, after inflation and things, we want to bring that back to a $12.69 an hour. I just want to wonder where we came up with that number. We had talked about that. Was this a number that was used from other cities, or is that something we talked about, or the EDAC bring that forward?
The change to 175% was something that I discussed with our council in their experience with wage floors in other business subsidy policies.
Is that the end?
It is. I'm just doing a calculation.
What? Any questions?
No, I think that's all right. It just concerns me.
Well, and let me speak to it in terms of the specific example that you were dealing with. We actually had some follow-on discussions with Sanmar after you took action on it, and there was some potential concern about the wage level at about $12 and $14 an hour, although ultimately they found out they wouldn't have an issue of it. Remember, that wage is without benefits. So the actual compensation package may be more than that, but the standard is wages without benefits. And so given what some of the experience we've seen has been, somewhere between 12 and 13 seemed an appropriate floor. The policy that has been revised provides for the council and the EDA to make alternative findings based on a number of other factors that relate to the specific industry that you may be dealing with, what the prevailing wage may be relative to that industry. So there is some flexibility in the revision beyond that floor to veer upwards, probably not downwards very often.
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, I tend to agree with Councilor Whiting on the dollar amount and the percentage. However, at the same time, the other side of my multiple personalities is telling me that in this economic climate, if you're going to attract big businesses, the 275 just is not realistic. So it really is dependent on the economic climate, and it's contingent on, the number of jobs. If it's 3 or 4 jobs at that wage, it's really not doing a whole lot for the community. If it's 50 or 150 jobs, it's a different scenario. So, it probably wouldn't take much to change this to 200 or something like that. But you really got to weigh both sides of it, I guess.
Councilor Whiting.
Yeah, there's 2 things I'd like to speak to. One is, does this policy include? Does it have to be a full-time person, or does this include temp labor?
The attorney can opine on this if they want to. My understanding of the policy and the intent of business assistance is that we'd be dealing with full-time equivalent jobs rather than part-time jobs.
Does it state it specifically enough that would be clear to people?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I believe so, but I will take a quick review to make sure.
Thank you.
The second part of that is I prefer to have the flexibility that we did with Sanmar and not have an open policy that, I hate to give away the taxpayer dollars and not get a valuable job in return. There's that middle class that I just feel we need to sustain to have a valuable job, a quality job. I know there is other benefits involved here, but to take it actually less than it was when this policy was first initiated, back even, more, I have a hard time with that.
So what is a percentage you would be comfortable with?
Well, I wouldn't like to see it less than that $14 range, to make it just above that average floor. So we're giving a little, we're getting a little back. So I'm not, the $19 that it was at, I think that was too high with 275%, but that's my concern.
Councilor Punt?
Well, I think what we have to keep in mind, though, is that the private employer determines the value of the job and what, who they can attract and retain at a certain level of pay. So that's really their role, is to determine the level of pay and, the skill set and who will accept that job. So to me, having it lower is actually better because it allows free enterprise. It allows a private employer to make a decision about how they're going to pay their employees without us, creating a threshold that's so high that they can't operate their business effectively. So I feel that lower rate actually gives them more flexibility because obviously they can go higher, but then they have the opportunity to be at that, 1269 is our number.
Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, to me, the driving force is that any subsidy coming from the taxpayers of Shakopee to businesses coming to town need to bring something to Shakopee, as Councilor Whiting pointed out. That's not your standard range job. I would think it would be just a above average job, and we need to determine what that number is. So I don't know what 200% works out to be, but that that might be a number we want to shoot for, unless I think the criterion here allows us to deviate from that under other circumstances. So, but I don't know that it lets us go higher. So I guess I would make the bar higher and then use the stipulations to lower that bar if need be.
200% would be $14.50 an hour.
Okay.
Before we go much further here, I'm going to ask for public comment, and then we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll have more discussion. Is there anyone in the audience for public comment for the hearing tonight on this item? All right, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing on business subsidy.
One comment before we do that?
Yes, sir.
I haven't had a chance to weigh in yet with our brethren here.
Yes.
I think the thing we need to consider also with this proposal for a basically a $12.69 per hour threshold for jobs is the fact that for a number of years, the state and federal funding for public education and for higher education has been, the funding for them has been suffering greatly. The cost of secondary or post-high school education has been rising. Fewer and fewer people are able to avail themselves of that. And there's been a number of articles in the news in the last number of months about the fact that employers are having trouble finding, or there's plenty of jobs for people with 2- and 4-year degrees post-high school in engineering and manufacturing, but we have a need for more jobs for just a high school education level position, which this $12.69 threshold would certainly serve to. I think until federal and state funding for education improves, we need to avail ourselves of an opportunity to find as much employment for those people who have a high school education and are looking for a job. I mean, those are certainly as important as bringing higher paying jobs to the community as well. I mean, people need to have jobs to afford whatever level of living they choose to have in Shakopee.
All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing, and then we'll continue discussion afterwards. Counselor Whiting?
Move to close the public hearing.
Counselor Lehman?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, public hearing, the city council public hearing is closed. Now, Mr. President, you need to close.
Move to close the public hearing for the Economic Development Authority. A motion,
I'll make that
Mr.
motion.
Lehman,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Whiting.
Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing for the EDA is closed.
Okay, Counselor Whiting?
Would it be possible to take this $12.69 and say that no more than 30% of the employment could be at that level, and then maybe make some windows and some ranges so that we could push the rate higher? I mean, we're giving away a subsidy, taxpayer money to bring in jobs. We want to add value, and that's my concern here. I want quality jobs. I understand that businesses need there's going to be a percentage of lower paying jobs. But I don't want to set that bar so low that we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Counselor Lehman?
I'd like to start out at 200% and use the various criteria points in the policy to be able to deviate if a company came in with, 200 jobs and said, 50% will meet that, but because there's going to be so many jobs, then the other 50% are going to fall below that, and then we would have the option to accept that or not.
I'm on board with that. Counselor White, whoever you are, Counselor Clay.
My concern is the ability for both our staff and these businesses to be able to monitor and track these things. If we place too many levels or continue, if we say that a certain percentage has to meet this from a certain dollar amount, then, what happens if they're off by one employee? Do they have to take one employee and arbitrarily pay them more or less to get the proper amount of employees into this range to meet that percentage? And where do we find staff time to monitor that kind of thing to make sure that, 35% are at this level and the next 35% are at this level? I think for something like this, for the sake of all concerned, we need to try to keep it as simple as possible.
I agree. Counselor Lehman?
And that, Mayor, that was my intent, just by changing the 175 to 200 and leaving all the criteria points in there, which gives you all that the leeway.
All right. Mr. Leek, what effect would that have any negative impacts from your standpoint or positive impacts if change it from 175 to 200? What are your thoughts?
From staff standpoint, I don't think it makes a lot of difference that you would change that basic floor. As you noted in C on page 2, there are a number of factors that we inserted back at the beginning of 2011 to try and address some additional flexibility. I think that would be easier than trying to introduce several levels or tier into the business subsidy policy up front and allow any particular business to make the case to the EDA and City Council that because of the other value they're bringing with their project, they warrant some additional consideration on wages for some portion of their workforce. So I don't think it makes a lot of difference as I see it.
Any other discussion? What is the requested action again here?
Mayor, while you're looking, depending on who you want to take action first, council is asked to adopt Resolution 7187, perhaps in the motion adopting that, noting the change to 200% as the wage floor. Same thing for the EDA Resolution 12-6.
Do we do EDA first and then City
Makes
Council?
no
Doesn't
difference.
matter? Okay, Counselor Lehman?
Make a motion to approve Resolution 7187, a resolution of the City Council approving the revised business subsidy policy, noting the change from 175% of federal minimum wage to 200%.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Counselor Whiting, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. President?
And for the Economic Development Authority, Mr. Whiting.
I'll move Resolution 12-6, a resolution approving the amended business subsidy policy,
Changing,
changing the 175% to the 200% of the national or federal minimum wage.
is there a second? Mr. Lehman seconds the motion. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
All right, item 6B, I will entertain a motion to open a public hearing on proposed tax increment financing and contract for private development for Trident Development LLC. Counselor Whiting?
Motion to open a public hearing.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Clay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
As for the Economic Development Authority, I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing for the same subject. Mr. Lehman,
So moved, President.
Second.
seconded by Mr. Whiting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The public hearing is open.
Mr. Leek?
Thank you, members of the council and board. You are asked this evening to continue this public hearing once again, specifically because, as the memo notes, there were suggested changes that we received last week from the council for the applicants who are in the audience this evening. We're continuing with our council to work through those changes, and rather than bring the TIF plan separately, staff thought it makes sense to get through that CPD, that contract for private development, and bring it as well as the TIF plan to you. So we're asking that you continue this public hearing to June 5th, and we hopefully will bring the entire package for action that evening.
Anybody in the audience wish to speak tonight?
Members of City Council and EDA Board, my name is Roger Fink. I'm with Trident Development LLC, the applicant for the tax increment financing. Thank you for considering our application, and thank you for giving us the time to continue this action to the next meeting. We've made excellent progress with our legal counsel and the city's council as well, and I think within the next few days we'll probably have all of the minor issues remaining ironed out and be ready to present to you on your next council meeting a final version of that development agreement, as well as
the TIF plan.
The TIF plan, yes, thank you. We're happy to answer any questions if you need be.
Anyone have questions? Counselor Clay?
Thank you, Mr. Fink. When this does come back at the next meeting, and this may be a question for staff as well, could you, and I'm sure you have this information probably at the tip of your fingers, other cities or governmental entities that have granted TIF for senior housing or assisted housing, the ratio between the amount of TIF that was granted per unit of subsidized housing, if you could.
I'm sorry.
How many dollars of TIF per unit of subsidized housing is typical or has been typical in the past?
The best way that I can know to answer that is that the amount of tax increment generated and the amount of TIF funds available for any given housing project is limited by the tax capacity of that property. Mm-hmm. So it would be very difficult to compare apples to apples when you've got a property in Shakopee, Scott County, to a property that's in Little Falls in Morrison County. The tax rates, the tax values, the taxes are considerably different.
Then let me revise the request to be tax capacity. per unit of subsidized housing. So I think that would be a more accurate
Well, I guess
comparison.
to complete that answer, I would say the amount of tax capacity available in a smaller outstate community such as Princeton or Little Falls is considerably less than the tax capacity that would be achieved in a community like Shakopee. Taxes are higher.
Yeah, so when you bring that information back to us, it would have to be per community.
So you're asking this for the June 5th meeting, right? Not for
If
the answer
it's,
tonight.
no, not for tonight, if it's possible. I'm just
I would be
curious.
happy to share with you the tax increment programs or the business subsidy amounts that we received from those other communities, if that would be of help.
I would be interested in those numbers.
Personally, I've not done the analysis on a per unit basis or as a percentage of the project. Generally, we just look to see what does this property generate in tax increment, and how much of that is available as a business subsidy.
Yeah. And that's what I'm looking for.
Sure,
The business subsidy aspect of it per unit.
So I'll promise that at the next meeting, I'll bring you some of that information.
If it's possible, if it's something that's just not possible to get in such a short period of time, I
No,
would
it's easily-
understand, but,
You can easily find that.
okay, thank you.
Are you clear on that, Mr. Leek?
Indeed.
Beautiful. Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to June 5th. Councilor Lehman, do
Motion to continue the public hearing till June 5th.
we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
And for the EDA, I'll entertain a motion to continue the hearing to June 5th. Mr.
I'll
Lehman.
make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Whiting seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are continued to June 5th.
All right, now in our fun night, I will entertain a motion to recess. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you can leave this council meeting open and just continue on with your EDA business and then
Yeah.
adjourn your EDA meeting and go back into the council meeting.
Okay.
We got a couple items on EDA to finish up here. I believe they are approval of the minutes for April 17th and April 24th. Mr. Whiting.
I'll approve the minutes, make a motion to approve the minutes for April 17th and April 24th.
Motion to approve those minutes by Mr. Whiting, seconded by Ms. Punt. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. I believe the last item would then be acceptance of the resignation of Fatima Franzen from the Economic Development Authority Committee. Mr. Whiting.
I'll make a motion to accept with regret the resignation of Fatima Franzen from the EDAC. Direct staff to take the appropriate steps to fill the vacancy created.
Motion has been made and seconded by Ms. Punt. Discussion.
I actually have a question on that. How are we going to fill that position?
Members of the EDA, we've checked the previous applicants that we've had for boards and commissions. The only person who expressed an interest in the current slate of candidates listed EDAC, I think, 4th. And so talking with the city clerk, I believe we're going to go ahead and re-advertise the opening for that one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Discussion. All those in favor, Mr. Whiting?
I'll move to adjourn to June 5th.
No, we have to vote on this yet.
Oh,
All those in
sorry.
favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now, Mr. Whiting.
Make a motion to adjourn to June 5th.
Motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Lehman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned
All right.
to the June 5th.
Thank you, everyone. So, just a question. Do we need to recess city council meeting for EDA hearings in the future? Because we always have and then reconvene.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, normally that makes sense when you're having an actual separate EDA meeting, but in this case, you had two meetings going on at the same
All right.
time.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, item 7, 2011 Annual Financial Report and Audit Presentation by Kern, DeWinter, and Veer, KDV. Ms. Linehan.
Good evening, members of the council, mayor, and viewing public. Included in your agenda packet this evening were 3 documents that are pretty critical to city operations each year. The first being the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. The second item being the report on compliance with governmental accounting standards and legal compliance. The third being the management letter. These are reports that are the outcome of a fairly extensive audit process that cities and municipalities in the state of Minnesota undergo. Before you this evening is Kara Gaffey. She's the audit manager with KDV, and she'll present a PowerPoint this evening that provides an overview of the 2011 audit, the process, the financial status of the city, and she'll highlight specific financial activity and focus that was covered during this audit. And at the end, if you have questions, she'll be glad to answer any of them. Ms. Gaffey?
Well, Mayor and Council, thank you very much for having us back to do your audit. I will try and be brief. Your meeting's already been a little while, so I'll try and make this as brief as possible. Jump in anytime if you have questions, but I'm going to spend the majority of my time going through the PowerPoint. And I provided a copy so it's a little easier to see. First of all, before we even start the audit presentation, I just want to say what an awesome looking CAFR you guys have. I have been showing this to all my coworkers. We get all sorts of crazy covers, and yours is beautiful, so great job on this.
Looks like Memorial Park.
Who is the
doesn't it?
photographer?
Our communications coordinator.
Nice.
Memorial Park?
We went through so many photos, I confirmed.
It's Memorial Park.
Actually, it's Plymouth. It's
This is the mill pond down here.
Oh.
This is a spot.
Okay, we're moving on.
Okay, the audit process, we started with planning. Like Julie said, it was very extensive. We were out here in March, did some interviews, did our test work, prepared this CAFR with the assistance of your staff, and now we're presenting this to you. In our independent auditor's report, we offer you an unqualified opinion. We're stating that we believe these financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with GAAP. We believe that there's no material misstatements and that you can rely on the numbers that are in there. We also went through a comprehensive annual financial report checklist so that you are able to receive your certificate of excellence on your financial reporting. We believe this report will receive the certificate. We did a Minnesota legal compliance report, which is required by the state auditor. We tested 7 areas, all very extensive areas you can see there, and we had no audit findings on your Minnesota legal compliance, so very good job on that. We provided a gas report also, which is required. This is government auditing standards. We had a few findings. There are 3 levels of findings. Material weakness is the most significant. Significant deficiency is the next level down, and then the lowest level is just a regular deficiency. We had 1 significant deficiency, and you've heard me say this before, the lack of segregation of accounting duties due to the number of staff that you have in your accounting processes. We had 2 lower level findings. Also, you've heard me talk about these, the ice arena receipting and the community center receipting. We offer suggestions in the management letter on how you can improve these processes at these 2 locations, and we'll work with Julie also to see if we can get those implemented for the next year. Your general fund did very well this year. Receipts are up. Disbursements were up only, we're about flat. I have to point out that this year we classified the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission. Normally it was classified as part of the city. This year it's classified as a component unit because it has a separate board. So the receipts from the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission for services performed are in the general fund for some of it, and those went into receipts. So a portion of your receipts is due to that. In the end, your general fund balance went up by about $266,000. You can see that the inclusion of the SPUC revenue increased the amount of per capita revenue, and the amount of expenses actually went down in 2011 per capita.
Did we incur the SPUC debt in our numbers also?
No.
Okay.
As an auditor, this is one of the most important screenshots and what we analyze the most. You, the council, approve what the city is going to spend. You approved a budget that would decrease your fund balance, would deficit spend by $345,000 a year and a half ago. In the end, your revenues came out about $1.2 million better than you anticipated, and your expenditures were $1.5 million under what you anticipated. In the end, you ended up transferring portions of that surplus that you did not spend to your capital project funds. So you have your capital project funds that you can spend on street improvements that I hear are needed. And then, so that went to your capital project funds, but you did have transfers in for some of the services that are performed in your general fund. So anticipated a $345,000 deficit. Your general fund increased by $266,000. So it did better than was anticipated. Some of the reasons that you had these variances, the general fund, you've always levied your entire levy, except for the EDA, in your general fund. Normally you would transfer that out to your debt service fund. Since it's levied in the general fund, it was left in the general fund this year. So your general fund levy was up. In addition, you collected some of your delinquent property taxes that are out there that are on foreclosed homes. When those homes are sold, you collect the back taxes on those. And fiscal disparities was up a little bit more than was anticipated. The charges for services would have been down under budget a little bit in building permits. However, that SPUC charges for services is in that number. All of your expenditures were under budget. You can see each category: general government, parks, public works, and public safety. A lot of that had to do with unfilled positions. You had some projects in the park that didn't take place. You had some public works projects that didn't take place. And in the end, you underspent by about $1.5 million. Increasing your fund balance increased your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of your expenditures to 49%. The state auditor uses this as a measurement to measure how healthy cities are. It's a measurement that can be applied to any size city. State auditor recommends between 35 and 50% of your expenditures. You, City Council, have approved a fund balance policy that says you want a minimum fund balance of 45%. So you are very close to what you want in your general fund, and you are within the state auditor's guidelines. Here are your revenues for the last 5 years. You can see that 2011, you have the highest amount of revenues. Again, that has to do with collecting those fees that were normally classified as transfers from the SPUC into charges for service. In addition, your property taxes, again, which are levied in the general fund, were kept in the general fund this year and not distributed to the debt service funds. You can see the bottom line is your property taxes that you levy. I really like this graph to show the correlation between what you're levying and the impact on your residents. The blue line is your tax capacity. It's the amount that you can levy. You, the county, the school districts, everyone can levy total. Because the property tax value has been decreasing, the tax capacity rate, which is a calculation of the total property tax value versus the amount that you're levying, is the result of that. That's the tax capacity rate. The state of Minnesota has an average tax capacity rate for cities of 42%. Your city is only levying 34%, so they're not levying quite what the average city is levying upon its taxpayers. When we look at your general fund expenditures, this is what we like to see. We like to see very consistent expenses. You spent 50% of your expenditures in 2011 on public safety. So on police and fire, this is very standard for a Minnesota city to put half of their resources to public safety. And the other categories, in addition, are very consistent And you can see you also put 21%, 22% to your park and rec. So you're supporting your rec center in your general fund. The sewer fund, you decreased the rates in 2011. Your expenses were up. You did some ditch and pond cleanings and some linings. Like I said, fees were down, but you have a very healthy fund balance in your sewer fund. At the end of the year, you had approximately $16 million in cash in that fund. So any sewer projects, you should feel comfortable knowing you do have funds set aside for that. It's higher than what we normally see in these funds in Minnesota. You did spend down some of your cash. You spent $600,000 on capital outlay last year in the sewer fund. The storm drainage fund is the same story. You decreased the fees to the users. Your expenses were down also. Just normal operations. You had a few less projects in that fund. And in this fund, you have $15 million in cash also. You did spend $1.5 million on capital projects in this fund. So you do have the money there for improvements. And again, very, very healthy balances. Your city has a AA2 rating. You got a very good interest rate that Paul is going to talk about in a little bit for your new refunding. And part of the reason is because of the health of your city. You do have these cash balances. You do have a very stable economy and taxpayers. So you are in the top 40% of cities in the nation in your bond rating. You can see how you've been paying off your debt. It has been decreasing. You only have $16 million in bonded GO debt at year end, which is very minimal. You'll see yourself compared to a couple cities in an upcoming graph, but a very low balance. And you can see based on your current debt without your refunding where your payments are going to. Interest is the largest portion in the next 5 years, and I know you're going to save some of that, and decreases down significantly down to 2030. We pulled some comparative cities. We changed it up from the city administrator's recommendation on who to compare yourself to. But you can see, and I just want to qualify this, that don't compare yourself across the board. Each city is very unique. You have higher revenues and you have higher expenses. You can see that your tax revenue is in line, so the amount that you're charging on taxes to your property owners is very consistent with the other cities. You can see it's very consistent also where you're spending your money. Excuse me, the majority of cities spend their money on public safety. 50% is where you spend your money, and you're in line. You do put more to park and recreation. And here's where your outstanding debt shows where you are compared to the other cities. You are significantly lower per capita in the amount of debt that you do have. But remember, a lot of these cities are unique. They have special assessments to back up a portion of that GO debt. And that's what I have for you.
One question on that last page.
Councilor Lehman.
The capital outlay
Yeah, what is it?
is substantially less for Shakopee than.
Yep. Yep, and Councilman Lehman, that is the capital outlay that's in the general fund. So if you are spending money in your capital project funds, it's going to be higher. So where some cities put some of their capital outlay in the general fund, others will put it in capital project fund, and that's your practice here, to spend it normally out of the general, or out of the capital project funds.
So the ones that are showing it higher are doing it out of their general fund?
Yeah.
Okay.
A portion of it, yep.
Question, Councilor Clay.
Thank you, Kara. We have for a number of years been noting these deficiencies, and because of the smaller staff size that we have. And we have just recently repositioned people from, that used to be, or as the city clerk duties to the finance department and added some staff, 1.5 full-time units, 1 full-time unit. With those changes, does that resulting in an improvement in these deficiencies?
I know that Julie and Karen and Melissa are looking at what they can do to segregate the duties more. So I'll be very curious to see how next year turns out as to what they can come up with. I know it'll be easier to segregate the duties with more help up there, but I do know that there's more on Julie's plate now with her additional clerk duties.
So it's too soon to tell?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilor Lehman.
If I'm reading the management letter correctly on that subject, the issue isn't necessarily hiring help. The issue is having different people that we currently have designated for different functions.
Right, but if you don't hire additional people, then you don't have enough people to segregate the duties. And in addition, there should be one person that is completely oversight over all of it that can double check what's going on. And at this point, you don't have that right now.
Councilor Clay?
If I was guessing correctly, it looked like we would need at least 2 or 3 additional employees to really start addressing some of those concerns? Or is that number too low or too high?
You know, without actually sitting down and going through each of the processes and seeing what creative ways you can work, the new assistant in...
But it's too soon to tell?
Right.
Okay.
Ms.
I'm
Lanahan,
sorry.
would you like to comment at all?
Julie will always comment if you ask her, whether she wants to or not.
I just try and keep you happy. I think one of the issues that we've talked about a lot through this audit process evolves through how to segregate duties better. But I think another component of this is the development of more clearly defined procedures. Because once you get some of those pieces in place and just have that as the starting tool for how you are going to train specific positions on very specific tasks, and how you do things like cover when people are gone, deal with staff changes, how do you address all of the components of the day-to-day transactions that, as we go through audits, there's always issues that pop up. It's an evolving process where you start from developing the procedures, implementing them, finding the staff training time, and then checking through as you are implementing this to see, is this really bringing about better segregation? That's ultimately going to be our goal. Does that answer your question?
So it's too soon to
tell.
Thank you. Would you like that in a button?
Any other questions? Councilor Whiting?
I'm sorry, Julie, while you were up there. Have you had some thought of how you're going to address the reseating issues at the community center?
Yes, we currently have been working on that just in the last 2 weeks of really identifying what is the current process, who are the people who do this, what are the transactions, how do they flow through the bank, how do they then flow through the operations of the city's financial department, and identifying the weak links and finding out, okay, if we change this, or if we approach this differently, or we bring something from one area to another, it's evolving. It's going to get there. I'm not going to tell you it's going to be done in 2 to 3 weeks because there are a lot of procedures here to address.
So what should we say?
It's too soon to tell, but it is evolving.
Councilor Lehman?
The 15 and 16 million in the storm sewer and storm and sewer fund there's a baseline for the 35 to 55%, which we took the middle number of 45 for reserve, but is there a baseline overall for those funds?
Right. What you're referring to, Councilmember Lehman, is the enterprise funds, the stormwater and the sewer. They are distinctly different than the general fund because they run just like a business. When we've talked about the capital project planning for the overall city, a major component of this for the next 5 to 7 years is the sewer and the stormwater. You have an infrastructure that is definitely aging, and there are whole areas of it that haven't been addressed. Hence, you can see by the last 2 years, the recent repair, maintenance, and increased costs there. There are going to be a number of projects that will be coming forward to you in the next 5 years that will require these dollars in these funds if we're going to successfully maintain systems that are as costly as those two enterprise funds are. The one issue I think it's very difficult for a general layperson to grasp is just the sheer cost of running enterprise funds, because they require such significant cash outlay up front. They have long-term implications, and they really do require a fund position significant to cover not only operations, but expansion of capacity or expansion of what you need for future growth, and then dealing with what's referred to as the worst-case scenarios or your crisis items. So the dollars that we have in there may, and I'm not going to tell you will completely cover all planned costs, but as we go through and have longer-term planning on those funds, we're going to be again addressing rates, because there may not be the ability to hold them flat.
I think I'm asking it from a different perspective. I'm really asking it from the auditor's perspective, because what I heard from the auditor was that we're much healthier than most cities in the state, and I am assuming that most other cities in the state will take a big project, gather debt for the project, make payments on the debt, so on and so forth. And us being in that kind of position, I mean, where should we be? Yeah, it's nice to be way ahead. I'm not arguing that fact. I'm asking where's the midpoint for everybody else?
Well, when we speak about enterprise funds, and what we see as a healthy enterprise fund is anything with over 100% of their expenses in their unrestricted balance. So if you want to look at your enterprise funds, your sewer and your stormwater, to see where those are, go to your CAFR. And go to page 32.
Which one are you in?
I'm in the, yeah.
The CAFR.
The pretty picture.
I've never heard CAFR before. I really like that. Which page?
34.
Page
Thank you.
32. You can just lay it flat because you want 33 also. So if you want to know what 100% would be, look at your total operating expenses in your sewer fund on page 33 of 3.8 million. And look at your unrestricted net assets on page 32 of 16 million. You can kind of see how healthy you are. So, like, your question was, Councilmember Lehman, yes, most cities, if they want to do a sewer project, they have to go out and bond, and they have to pay 2 to 5% interest on that, and their rates, utility rates, need to cover that. You have the funds sitting in your unrestricted right now, where you'd be able to cover that with no interest costs, and know that additional cost would not be passed on to your current users of the system. So it's really what your council is comfortable with, where the comfort level is with you. If you're more comfortable bonding, paying those interest costs, then, that's up to you.
It looks like we have, our expenses in the sewer fund were a quarter of the fund balance. So we're only our expenses are only 25% of the fund balance, which, that's a pretty good fund balance. Well, more typical for other cities similar to us would be what kind of ratio?
Well, like I said, if you're at 100%, so if your net assets, your unrestricted, is 100% of your expenses, that's ideal. That's good for a lot of cities.
And we're 3 times that?
And if I can interject, historically, from what we've reviewed, the city of Shakopee does not issue debt for enterprise fund activities. It has built up the funds and prepared for the future costs rather than issuing the debt, paying the cost of bonding, the interest, the long-term carry.
That's clear.
Just one more. Ms. Lenahan, you mentioned that enterprise funds tend to be rather expensive to administrate. Do we have any other option?
I think I misled you if I said they're expensive to administrate. They are run like a business. You have your revenues, you have your expenses, you have your capital outlay, and you have rates that cover your cost of service. If it is established as an enterprise fund, and this is where it gets back to the discussion that Kara had relating to the component unit. In previous years, you saw all 4 of your enterprise funds in here, water and electric included. These are the only 2 existing enterprise funds of the city, the sewer and the storm drainage, because they are funded purely through user fees.
So we have no choice but to have them as enterprise funds
Right.
because they are funded through
They
user
fit the
fee.
classification of an enterprise fund.
Okay.
Mhm.
Does the sewer fund, the enterprise fund, does that include the SAC credits, or those are not included in that as a cash equivalent?
They're
They're not.
And that brings up a whole nother item that we've changed in this year's CAFR also, and that is the, if you look on page 32, look under your non-current assets, you'll notice on
Long-term
there is
SAC
long-term
credits.
SAC credits. This has been the first year that that
0.3
specific
million.
designation of your SAC credits has been brought into your CAFR. Easily retrievable, you'll see that now, year to year to year.
Thank you.
Okay. And the quiz will be, do you know what CAFR stands for at the end of the meeting?
CAFR? Could you spell that, please?
Is it with a C or a K?
It's not yet been determined.
Okay, other questions?
Comprehensive annual financial report.
Wow, Councilor Lehman just caught on.
Right.
I like that.
I love those in acronyms.
Okay, any other questions from staff at all? All right,
Motion to accept would be appropriate.
all right. Do we have a motion to accept? Councilor Lehman?
Make a motion to accept the 2011 audit and the accompanying reports.
Do we have a second? Councilor Clay? Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Item number 8, bond sale results, refunding of 2004A and 2004D, resolution number 7199.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council, and viewing public. Included in your packet for this evening's council action is the refunding of 2 previously issued debt items, 2004A, 2004D. What we are dealing with here is 2 debt issues from 2004 that were issued rather long-term with maturity of 2025. As you recall, in budget discussions of 2012, there was discussion by the council of what could we do to review and possibly benefit from the market of the declining interest rates, and would refunding debt be an option? Before you this evening is the results of the start of that discussion. There was a bond sale today for the refunding of 2004A and 2004D. With me this evening is Paul Steinman, Vice President Springstead, who is our financial advisor, and he will update you on the results of the bond sale, the bond rating that we've recently received from Moody's, and other information, and feel free to interject with questions for Mr. Steinman as he's going through his presentation.
Thank you, Julie. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Paul Steinman bringing forth to you this evening the results of a bond sale today that was held at 10 a.m. this morning. We took competitive bids in our office. There were 9 underwriters or syndicates of underwriters represented on the yellow sheet that is before you. Each underwriter with the true interest rate bid on the right-hand column, carrying over to the opposite side of the sheet. The winning bid this morning was from underwriter Raymond James and Morgan Keegan at a true interest rate of 1.75%. Again, this is for debt that goes out to 2025. The result of the 1.75% interest rate is a future value savings to the city of about $442,000 through 2025. Excellent results and an excellent bid. As part of the process of the competitive offering, we went through a conference call with Moody's, who reassigned or reaffirmed Shakopee's rating at AA2, and made a couple of comments that I'd just like to share with you. Sometimes I only share the comment, what would change the rating up, but I think it's only fair to also add to that what would change the rating down. But I want to focus on up, so I'm going to save that till last. What could change your rating down? Now, a lower rating from AA2 would be AA3. And today, a AA3 would have priced about 10 basis points higher than 1.75%. That means 1.85%. That would have cost you or would have subtracted from your savings about $40,000. One change rating up to AA1 would have saved you potentially today an additional $40,000. So there are significant implications to the rating. So the AA2, what could change your rating down? As indicated in the Moody's report, a continued and sustained decline in full valuation, disproportionate to that of other cities in the Twin Cities area. And secondly, deterioration of the city's fund balances or liquidity. Those are two things that could change the rating down. There is only one item listed what could change the rating up, and that is sustained stabilization of valuation trends, reversing the multi-year trend of valuation declines. And what's obvious in most of this is, a lot of it is outside of your control. That valuation piece is more economic based today than anything. So we have expectation that in the future there should be upward pressure on the credit rating, and we'll make that known to the rating agency when we go through the process. Again, so with that, my recommendation for the resolution that's before you is to award the bid for the refunding bonds in the amount of $4.865 million to Raymond James Morgan Keegan at a true interest rate of 1.75%. And I'm happy to take questions.
Councilor Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Steinman. There were two things that could bring our credit rating down, and the first one was what? I didn't quite understand it.
The first issue cited by Moody's that could reduce your credit rating would be valuation decline that is disproportionate to other valuation decline in other cities in the metropolitan area.
Oh, okay. So it's
And the other was
compared to-
deterioration of your fund balance.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
I got it.
Councilor Lehman?
Well, Mayor, I'd point out that we just, not too long ago, had our credit rating improved. So I don't think we'll see a back-to-back improvement, just for the reason of it would be back-to-back. But probably it wouldn't surprise me in a couple of years, once the economy turns around, values come back, then I think we'd be due for another increase in our rating. Pretty accurate statement, would you agree?
Councilor Lehman, the conversation that we had with Moody's was that there is upward pressure on your rating, if not for the valuation
Right.
issue. Economic based, again, generally outside of anyone's control at this point. But so yes, in a few years, we would have that expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Councilor Lehman?
I'll offer resolution 7199 awarding the sale of, you want the exact amount there? 4.865 million?
Yep.
General obligation improvement refunding bond series 2012A to Raymond James Morgan Keegan at 1.75%.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Counselor Whiting? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Just like to note that Ms. Linehan was keeping an eye on this, and as a result of this, you've saved $300,000 through her recommendation, so she should be commended for that.
It was 400
Thanks, Julie.
and some.
400 and something.
465, I believe.
One of the items that was, I think, very unique about this bond sale was the Moody's rating call that we had. It's been a while since we've had such an in-depth conversation with them, and it went longer than what they had actually put aside because of the activity. And I wanted to give thanks to Michael Leake because he was very instrumental in updating them on a lot of information on the changes in this community. So thank you. It was very important when we were meeting with them.
Wonderful.
Mayor.
Well done, everyone. Counselor Lehman?
I believe it was 465 savings.
Large chunk of
442? 442, so we'll make sure that we don't allow him to shortchange it where due is good.
Thank
Credit
you.
is due.
Very nice. All right. We are 10D1. Approval for MnDOT Cooperative Agreement application for Vealing Drive from 69 to Taylor Street. Mr. Loney.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. See if I can, yeah. Now he's out of the room, we can spend some money now.
Spend somebody else's money.
I got two items here. They are related, but they're separate actions. And they deal with the Burling Drive extension. This is something that we've had on our radar actually since '97, actually, to tell you the truth. Because there's, once the 169 project was done, there's excess right-of-way over in that area. However, MnDOT elected to hold on to it until what was going to happen with Trunk Highway 41, EIS, and what was going to happen with the interchange right-of-way. So I got a little PowerPoint here. It's real short. But one of the things I have done recently is met with MnDOT staff, and they have actually, through the interchange project that's going on, 169 and County Road 69, that they've looked at supporting local roads, and one of these would be Burling Drive, and we've met on whether or not this would qualify for as a cooperative agreement project. There is a Metro Municipal Agreement Program, and there's $4 million in that pot, and there's a maximum amount to one project is $702,000. Our project that we're looking at is much less than that, so it fits very well in the program. We need to submit an application by July 31st to be considered, and if we are selected, this project would then be funded. We can go ahead and build a project in 2014, which is about the same timetable as the interchange. Looking at this, oops. Here we go. This area that's outlined in kind of mauve or pink, that is parcel 43. And we actually have built a little bit of Burling Drive and built a pond in 1997, 98. So this is the remaining segment to be built to connect Burling Drive with County Road 69. It goes to the middle of parcel 43. We call it parcel 43 because it's part of a MnDOT plat. MnDOT went through that whole corridor, did several right-of-way plats. It's parcel 43 of right-of-way plat 70-16. So this is the area that we're showing going through that, the area that we're looking at submitting for a cooperative agreement. Previously in '97, we did a layout. It was one of the times that Cub Foods was looking at going either on the west side,
And this area, if I can get the pointer to work, this is County Road 69 here. We built 300 feet of this roadway already, and then we built the rest of Verlin Drive to Taylor Street right in here. And this may not be the design that we're gonna do. We're gonna relook at things and take a look at, but we could actually remove the frontage road further back so it has a safe intersection and in connection to County Road 69. So, got a proposal from our consultant with their expertise in how to prepare a cooperative agreement proposal. They would do the application, address MnDOT's comments, and do a revision of the submittal, and that the cost would not exceed $4,540. We also put in the proposal that they may need some additional, we may need some assistance for right-of-way, and that'll pertain to the next item that I go through. But this is, we'd ask the council for 2 actions here to go ahead with this cooperative agreement. The reasons for it, the interchange is in final design now, so we now know where the right-of-way limits will be. MnDOT is supportive. They're going to throw their weight behind our proposal. They'd like to see this road be successful in the selection process. And this would provide funding for us. And, you know, for our street program, that we get the funding. Sewer and water work that we would do for that road project would be assessed to the adjacent parcels. With that, I would take any questions and would ask you to, for a motion for us to submit for this municipal agreement program and consultant proposal.
Councilor Lehman?
2 questions, Mayor. First question, Bruce, is what's the ballpark of that building that section of road? And then the second part of the question is, can them funds be used toward the purchasing of the right-of-way that the road would sit on?
Well, that's the second one first. No, the funds that would be available would only be for construction.
Okay.
No engineering and no right-of-way.
Okay.
Ballpark figure we had, it'd probably be still pretty close, but it was around 450 to 500,000.
Okay. So we're under the 702 mark.
We'd be under 700,000.
Okay.
Councilor Punt?
I'm just unclear of who would be assessed.
Well, we would assess, if I could go, once we build this road through here, these adjacent parcels, even though that's MnDOT, it's called MnDOT surplus right-of-way. They purchased this for future interchange. At one time, this intersection was considered to be the big interchange that would go across the river. That is no longer going to be that interchange. So we have an interchange selected here. You would have parcels on either side of the roadway. With the splitting, with Verlin Drive going through there, we would be creating parcels. So that land adjacent to that roadway would be assessed.
Owned by, currently owned by?
MnDOT.
I think was their question.
Right.
Currently, yeah, it's MnDOT owns it, so, and they don't pay assessments.
Right.
They would get rid of the land at some point. That'll be the next item we
And I know
talk
that's
about,
the
if we
next
get it.
item as well, but
Yep, we would have to hold on to those assessments, and then, or if they sell the property to someone else, they would get those assessments. It
So
goes
we
to the
would-
land, the assessments.
So it would be whoever the future owner of that land
Mhm.
is. Okay.
And would they need to be the owner at the time of the completion or the time of the construction? How is that determined?
We would do an assessment project like we normally do. We do a public improvement project and then put the assessments on. One of the things with this proposal, if we get the funds to build a road, the assessments would be a lot less than if we didn't get those funds.
Right.
The assessments would really be for the sewer and water.
What is the status of the land? I think was an old gas station or truck stop. I'm not sure what used to be there.
Truck stop.
That square right there, that's Jack's
Yeah.
Truck Stop.
Jack's Truck Stop.
It used to be way back when.
That is, MnDOT is currently looking at that, and This will probably become excess right away as well.
MnDOT owns it now.
Yes.
Council Lehman?
Mayor, what would happen if we assessed MnDOT for the improvement and in negotiations, they took the amount of assessment and applied it to a reduction in the cost of the right-of-way?
Oh, that would be a wheeling and dealing there. I don't know if I could do that. I don't think they would agree to that.
Oh, you'd have to get them drunk first, but.
Yeah.
We always do business.
All right, any other
But-
questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Let's see.
Council Lehman?
I'll make a motion to approve a letter requesting that MnDOT sell parcel number 43, PID 27. Oh, that's.
Oh, that's the wrong one.
Second, first one.
I'm ahead of myself, sorry.
Chicken, not egg.
Well, I guess we'll just go ahead and let them guys make a motion to staff submit for MnDOT Municipal Agreement Program for the Veerling Drive Extension and County Road 69 to Taylor, and also approving the proposal for WSB and Associates to prepare the Municipal Agreement Program submittal, not to exceed, I think it was 4,500, 4,540.
Is that a firm number?
Yep. It's a cost not to exceed.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
Okay, the next item is related to the first item. And one of our items for this discussion was, once we were talking about this cooperative agreement, we also mentioned there was land, I mean, this land has been on the docket, on our radar to see when was this land to become excess right away or surplus. So the city of Shakopee probably would have, because we did the RALPH program, we did our revolving loan fund, we bought the land with Met Council funds. MnDOT then paid us back for that. I think there's some obligation to give the city first crack, and that's what they usually do on many of these excess right-of-way. So the action here now would be, do we want to request MnDOT to sell the surplus property to the city of Shakopee, or where do we want to go with this? I'm bringing this forward because they were kind of interconnected. Give you some history here. MnDOT purchased this parcel in the 90s for the 169 project. We did purchase a portion of parcel 43 for our Veerling Drive extension in 98. Trunk Highway 41 EAS has determined a final alignment, or not really a final alignment, but it's they know where they're going now. It's not going to be in this location. And 169 and County Road 69 interchange has determined right-of-way limits. Again, looking at this drawing here, the parcel we're talking about is this parcel 43. It's kind of an odd shape piece. We've already paid $115,000 for the Veerling Drive and this pond in this area. It's 23.3 acres. It is zoned for commercial, guided for commercial. And one of the things in order to get the ball rolling, MnDOT said the next step would be for us to get a letter of support. We're requesting MnDOT sell the parcel to us. We need to decide whether we want the entire parcel or maybe land only needed for Veerling Drive construction. MnDOT paid $784,995.70 for that parcel. We have paid them $115,000. So if we were to reimburse MnDOT what they paid for it, it's $669,995, or approximately about $33,000 an acre. That's what they paid. So some of the other questions, and I don't know what the value of land is anymore. It's really tough to estimate. Some thoughts is, do we want to get an appraisal? MnDOT, if they would sell it on public auction, they would get an appraisal and put it out for a public bid. Or they get an appraisal and say we can buy it for an appraised amount if their appraised amount is less than what they paid for it. That's where question is, where do we want to go? Do we want to go get some more information on the value of land Is this a good deal? Should we go only negotiate for the right-of-way for Burling Drive or buy the entire parcel?
Council Whiting.
Members of the council, Bruce, maybe you can help me with this. What's the past practice been of purchasing land for economic development for the city? Has that been done on a regular basis? Has it been done?
We have done pass-throughs where we'd get the land. If we had a developer willing to come in here, we would be able to get the land and pass it through if the development comes. We have done that on some areas, but they've been mainly smaller acreages.
Is that what we're looking to do here, or?
Well, in this case here, if we would buy the entire land, then we would have to dispose of it through an RFP process, similar to what we're doing with the fire station site.
Mr. Mayor, this is.
It could be a commercial economic development opportunity. It also, do we want to get in that business?
Could be an arts center.
Too soon to tell.
Too soon to tell, yeah.
All right, Mr. McNeil.
This is truly something different than what we've done, as Bruce has indicated. There have been some remnants parcels of 169, which we have facilitated for interested buyers. However, this is probably something which we've not done before. Earlier with this council, we've talked about being perhaps more proactive with economic development. This is an opportunity for someone who would be interested in larger parcel of land to come in and talk with us, but we don't have anybody lined up right now. The question is, are you comfortable with an outlay such as been described here, with the understanding that we may not have an immediate turnaround on it? One has to think that with the improvements to 69 and 169 upcoming, and with the river crossing, that it is something that will be of more interest in the foreseeable future.
Council Lehman.
I agree. I think with the improvements at that intersection coming in the next year or two, that's going to be a high sought area for the private sector. I was thinking at a minimum, we should offer to buy the right-of-way needed for the road, for sure. And see if they even are interested in that. And then, when we're done with the road and dedicating the right-of-way on both sides of the road, or buying the right-of-way on both sides of the road, then they can see if they want to sell it openly, see if they're interested in that. And if they're not, and worst case scenario, we would tell them we'd buy the portion and the right-of-way for the road, and then we would be interested in seeing an appraisal on the value of that property, because I think it's going to be less with the downturn than what it was when it was purchased.
Council Clay?
I generally agree with Mr. Lehman, although I think it might be an unparalleled, an unusually serendipitous opportunity for us to pick up this parcel and then be able to guide it in its development the way we would like, and not wait for someone to come in with their own ideas. Rather than just have MnDOT's assign someone to come up with an estimated value for it, I think we should maybe want to spend a few $1,000s once again and hire somebody like Dick Marks to give us just an informal letter of appraisal or estimated value on it, or a value range on it, so that we would have some assurance that we're in the correct ballpark for an offer to the state on it. The reason I mentioned Mr. Marks is that he's done a lot of work in this area, not only for us, but for other governmental entities and for right-of-way projects, and probably knows this area as well as anybody, and can give us I think a pretty accurate estimate without a great deal of expense and work, if we're willing to ask for a range.
Mayor?
Okay.
Members of
Shalom,
council,
yes.
I just want to say that there's no urgency. I mean, there's not like we have to do this tonight, but it does take time sometimes to get MnDOT to, get a final agreement. as long as 18
Move even
months.
more slowly than we do?
Yes.
Counselor Punt?
So do we know what type of appraisal might be acceptable to them?
I would have to ask.
'Cause I-
They have their
I
own
think we should
appraisers
determine
and they have other people that they use. But I think what Mr. Clay is referring to is to give us an idea.
Yeah.
If it'd be worth pursuing.
Right.
Counselor Whiting?
I think it is a choice area to look at some of those ideas of development for our future. Would this, if we went ahead with something like this, would the city try and utilize it to make a little money off the property, or would we just try and get what we put into it for development? Get what we put into it?
That's your choice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of your call.
We're
as a
making money
council.
on it, if we can.
Well,
Counselor Lehman?
Mayor, even if you sold it for what you got into it, and somebody builds a $10 million building on it, you're making money.
Mm-hmm.
Just based on having the tax base there, so.
And you know, we could, as an interim use between, if we did wind up owning this parcel as an interim use so that it has a public purpose and could be tax exempt, could be a nice temporary off-leash dog park.
Well, let's
Yep.
not go there.
It already is. No, we don't want to pick up the property and then have to pay property taxes on it. We want to
Yeah.
put it to a civic use and
I see.
keep it exempt.
Counselor Lehman?
Mayor, would it make sense to have staff find out what it would cost us to have Mr. Marks put an appraisal together for us on this parcel?
Mr. Loney, what do you think?
I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, it seems like a good deal, or the price is right, but the market's been so depressed, and we really don't know. It would be a good idea to get an idea where we're at.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Would you restate it for me?
Direct staff to get an estimate on Mr. Marks's services for an appraisal on that property and bring that back to us.
Do we want to specify the
Until-
person, or do we just want to say we
Yeah,
want
Mr. Marks.
That's what I'm, is there a second? I'm sorry.
Second.
All right, discussion. Do we want to specify the person or just say we would like an appraisal?
If it's an expenditure under 50,000 now, 100,000, yeah, it doesn't require going out for bids.
He has.
I can't imagine a person more qualified right now to do this for us.
Counselor Whiting?
Do we want to see if MinDOT would accept that proposal from him?
Well, they would still do their own, but I think, we want something else other than just what MinDOT says it's worth to
Heavily.
reassure us that we're conducting this in a fiduciarily responsible manner.
Wait, point of
Sorry?
clarification, we're not looking for an official appraisal, but more of a qualified opinion?
Yeah, and within a plus or minus 10% range.
Okay. I know what we're looking for there.
Okay. Any other discussion?
That'll give us a ballpark between what the remainder is from the original agreement in 98 or whatever it is to the current economics condition.
Yeah.
Got it. And my question on that is not the action. It's specifying from up here who aren't always the best deciders of who specifically we should use as opposed to simply saying to get the work done and figure out how to get it done from staff. That's my only qualm with it, but knowing Councilor Clay's connections in the assessment world and appraisal world, I'm good
I've
with
actually
that.
worked with Mr. Marks for 5 years, 6 years on the board of, what do they call it, Board of Equalization.
Or review.
Review. And,
Does it cause us any problem specifying that?
No, we will check prices and his availability. If he's booked for quite a while, we'll come back and suggest that it might be something else, but if you're just looking for this now, we get a price.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Item number 11, council member reports. Councilor Whiting.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Monday the 7th, I attended the Sanmar groundbreaking. Had a nice little tour of their facility. Going to be a very interesting business in town here. Very looking forward to that coming to town here. Yesterday, I went to the school board meeting. They actually had almost a record meeting, a 46-minute meeting. I think we should look towards that for this group. Goal. They approved approved the diplomas for the graduating class for 2012. So congratulations to those people who graduated. They also hired a special services director, Scott Hare, from the Jordan Belle Plaine area. That's about it.
Thank you. Councilor Clay?
Nothing tonight, sir.
Councilor Lehman?
169 Corridor Coalition, what was the date? Can't remember the date. But anyway, we met and went over our information for upcoming MnDOT strategy meetings for the 169 corridor from north all the way down. I am going to the meeting on the 29th, I believe it is, along with Michael Leake. I think he's attending. And we're going to point out how important 169 is, not only to moving traffic and goods and services, but the fact that by the state government's own admission, 41% of the jobs in Minnesota are located 10 miles from 169. So we're going to point that out, and we've got a list of projects that corridor coalition believes is important for the function of 169. And I'm sure there's a lot of competition in the state for various corridors that need funding, and MnDOT obviously doesn't have enough money to do all of them. And when the economy turns down and people drive less and pay less gas taxes, there's less funding for them. So it's kind of a mess they've got themselves in. But you can't argue the fact that 41% of the jobs in Minnesota are within 10 miles of 169. So if you're going to get the biggest bang for your dollar, you're going to look at making them improvements in the area where the biggest economic bang can happen, because then you're going to get the payback into the state fund for the transportation to continue the process. So at least that's the argument I'm going to make.
Very good.
So it should be interesting. I'll let you know after that meeting how it goes.
Thank you. Councilor Punt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no report.
I have a couple things on. I also went to Sanmar groundbreaking, which was really good. Excited to have them here in Shakopee. On the 6th, I went to welcome home ceremony here at the American Legion. All the Red Bulls from our entire region were here. There were didn't get an official number, but there were 300-400 at least packed into the Legion, and there's parking everywhere. But it was a really great ceremony. Senator Franklin was there, and it was wonderful to be a part of that, so it was really cool. Then Regional Council of Mayors was on Monday and talked a lot about higher education, and that was a great meeting as well. And then today I went to Saks for their Liberty Day celebration, and they talked all about liberty and freedom, and it was really neat. A lot of fifth graders did projects about freedom in the United States, and it was a very neat thing to see all the little kids getting really excited about country, and so that was good. Item number 12, other business. Councilor Lehman.
Brief overview of closing 69 down here. I've got a couple of calls on that, and I brought it up with staff, and apparently there's, how long is it going to be closed?
Mayor?
Mr. Loney?
Mayor, members of council, one of the issues come up during the construction is it is too difficult to get the utilities in when keeping traffic open. It just wouldn't work out, and mainly because of the water services, keeping the water service lines connected. So they proposed a detour, and we have been working with them to make sure that it would have directional signage to the businesses in that area, that they would be able to see where they're going. And that's going to take place, I think, in May 21st. We're anticipating about 6 weeks for the closure. Could be more, depending how difficult the rock is to get out. So that's the story. I mean, we were trying to work it under traffic. It's too too dangerous in order to do the job right. So we're agreed to put a detour in, and we've been meeting with the residents and the businesses down there.
Mr. Lehman?
With Mayor, the only reason I brought it up was because when the project came forward before us here, we were told that they were gonna do it by closing one side and leaving the other side open, and then closing the other opposite side and leaving the other side open, and fielding these calls, it's better just to air it out right here and let the folks know what's going on. That, I mean, when they did the other end, they shut us down for quite a while too, and, you know, it's what you gotta do. Progress sometimes is painful, but when you're putting sewer and water and everything else in and changing all your storm water runoffs and stuff, it's kind of a big project. you
Yeah,
know?
if there is some benefit here is that by closing the road and getting the sewer and water in quicker, so the road can be opened up quicker versus putting up with traffic. If we could keep traffic open, it would be that condition longer.
Does it have any additional expense
No,
with that? Okay.
no, contractor's picking that all up.
Okay.
Just try to get everybody on the same page.
Any other business? All right, entertain a motion for a 10-minute break. Councilor
Motion
Lehman?
for a 10-minute recess.
Councilor Clay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are recessed for a 10-minute break. Item number 14, discussion of finance and budget issues. Mr. McNeil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. At the last meeting, there was some direction from you to talk about budget and finance issues. It's certainly timely, as within the next 30 days, staff will be receiving their instructions for preparation of the FY13 budget. We need to talk with you. It's going to take a few minutes just up front to set the table in terms of where we've been, some of the history, and some of the challenges that we're going to have facing us, not only for this next year, but in years to come. The things that we need to keep in mind that are already issues for us is that you're going to be going into the second half of union contracts with half of your employees. That's already been settled for 2013. That's a 2% increase that will take effect on January 1st. We know that health insurance costs have not stabilized. We are expecting probably a double-digit increase there, and we need to budget accordingly. Fuel prices, we've budgeted higher than where they are now, and that's perhaps a temporary blip. We also have heard reports that by the later part of the year, it may be back at $4 a gallon. It's just one of those things that no one can forecast. And then we have the typical inflation that we see for the goods and services that cities purchase. We are consumers of everything from rock salts to guns at the police department, so we have to keep those things in mind as well. 2 weeks ago tonight, you adopted the 12 priorities for the next 18 months to work for. Budget and fiscal policy is one of the top 4. We also had direction regarding infrastructure needs and funding. We're going to talk about that in a little more detail in another slide. Adequate staffing and training, and primarily when we talk about adequate staffing is so that there is the support so that when you need something done, when you direct us to go look for appraisals or things such as that, that we can get that done. We have economic development issues we want to talk about, both short and long term. Fire department staffing was one of the issues that has been identified in the past and continues to be an issue for us, especially when it comes to the area of daytime response. And then finally, we need some further consideration on what the future of the community center will be. All these items will cost money. With the budget, we also then have issues in those top 12 priorities: the infrastructure, funding for economic development, staffing. We're going to talk about some technology issues, and finally some of the amenities, some of the community investments that we've heard a call for, and we need to have you consider how we're going to address those. Regarding the budget, we've got infrastructure issues. You've heard earlier tonight a plea from residents in the 1000 block of Van Buren to take a look at what it would cost to get their street reconstructed. They've got sewer backups. Obviously, we need to do that at the same time. As Mr. Loney said a couple of years ago, our direction was from you to reduce the size of the projects, because while it is something that costs the resident about 30% of the total cost, you as a city have to pick up 70% of the remainder of that for reconstruction type things. That is an expense. In addition to that, we've talked about the need for putting money away for the bubble that's coming in 2016. That'll be the first of 6 or 7 years of, was it 7 miles a year?
6 to 7 miles a year.
6 to 7 miles a year that we're going to need for overlays. We've not put money away for that. That's also going to be a significant issue for us as we move ahead. And then economic development activities. We've talked at the April discussion about the need to look at where we're going. First, the short term, we've got staffing. Do we have adequate numbers of people to address the folks as they come to the city saying they need information for perspective, either transfer here or expansion, those sorts of things. But we also talked about things earlier tonight about what we will do on MnDOT Parcel 43. Is that something that we want to put money away for? The days of developers coming in and putting the pipe in the ground are much more limited than what they used to be. And cities are going to probably need to be more proactive in terms of making investments and perhaps taking some risk in terms of utilities. Bruce has also identified some things in the east end of Shakopee, some areas around Shenandoah, and then we also need to look longer term, as we spoke in the goal setting session, about doing some partnerships with Jackson Township and areas to the west for what a future industrial park might be to serve Shakopee. We have heard and we've talked about different levels of staffing needs. I'm going to turn this over to Chris Wilson, as she's been the one that's been putting the list together to describe what these are.
Thank you, Mark, and Mayor and council members. As I noted, this list is not in any priority order. Some of these items on here are coming up through staff's awareness of areas where we're struggling to meet the workload with the existing staff. Others are in response to feedback or comments by individuals or groups of elected officials. So first staffing need is the largest, and that would be to have full-time firefighters available for daytime response. Unfortunately, this is not an area where we can step into it. In order to have a daytime response crew, you're talking about 4 firefighters to staff 1 truck and move forward. So that's got a cost of anywhere from $238,000 just for the 4 firefighters, up to $320,000 if you address our training issues at the same time by having a daytime training officer. Police officers. There was talk during the campaign last fall about whether or not we had the right amount of police officers in our police force. A first step towards increasing that force would be to put our multi-housing officer that we currently have back out on the street and fill that position with a civilian to do that work. That has the $73,000 cost. Another potential item coming down the pike may be an increased or expanded partnership with the school district on our school resource officers. We currently have 3 school resource officers that are jointly funded by the city and the school district. The school district is adding a junior high next fall, as well as an alternative learning center, and those items may impact the partnership that the school district is looking to have with us. So the $103,000 is that crime prevention office, as well as another SRO. An economic development coordinator. There's been talk that we need someone that can devote their sole attention to economic development activities. Estimated wage and benefit price tag on that position would be $78,000. Public relations specialists. There's also been suggestion and feedback to us here at City Hall that we aren't doing a good enough job of getting the message out and getting the word out about the good things that are going on here in Shakopee. We currently have a communications coordinator who works 25 hours a week, spends the vast majority of their time keeping the city's website up to date, writing the quarterly print newsletter, as well as the e-newsletter, which goes out about every 3 weeks. There's not a lot of time in that day to do more than what's getting done currently. So if you want more in the area of PR or communications, you're going to need to look at a change in the staffing model there. Recreation facilities manager. We currently have a combined facilities staff that consists of a full-time supervisor and 2 full-time workers on the day shift. These are people that do everything from painting to working with our boilers, our air conditioning units, managing a lot of external contracts and so forth. We just aren't able to meet the needs and the desired level of facilities maintenance in the recreation area with the staffing that we have now. So if you want to look at an improved level of public appearance and condition and public presentation of the community center, the aquatic park, and the ice arena, we're going to need to do something about staffing in the facilities area. My estimated price for wage and benefits on that position is $68,000. Similar story in our information technology. We have a 2-person IT department that supports all 7 city departments, 125 full-time employees, plus a couple hundred at our peak part-time employees. They are stretched to their absolute max, and we've had 2 people for at least 8 years now at IT, and the amount of programs that we're running and our dependence upon our IT systems has increased significantly in that time, yet we still only have 2 people in that position. My suggestion on that one is that might be a place for increased consultant dollars before we go to an increased staffing role. The Natural Resources Coordinator is a position that has been kind of hanging in limbo for several years, currently not funded in the budget. But again, a question for the council as to what level of service or what level of work do you want done in that area. And then 2 items that are probably not 2013 items, but we want to make you aware that there are additional items that staff has on the 2014 or the 2015 list. One would be additional administrative support in the Public Works Department. Maintaining our fleet and our asset inventories is just simply grown to the extent that one person cannot do it all. And possibly a park maintenance operator. You brought a new park, constructed a new park last year, coming online for use in some ways this year and full use next year. And then also constructing a second park this year, which will follow that same pattern of bringing online. So when you add new assets like that that have to be maintained, we need to look at staffing in that division as well. So like I said, not a priority order list. Part of our discussion here with you today is to start to put some priority to lists like these and see where you're looking to go. But a significant portion of the city's budget, somewhere 12 million out of 20 million, goes to personnel costs, wages and benefits. We're a service organization and it takes human beings to deliver those services. So when you want more services or a different level of services, a lot of times you're talking about adding more people to the city staff. So that's our starting list, and I'll hand it. Oh, technology. Alrighty. One way in recent years that we have tried to fend off the need for more staff in certain areas is to invest in technology. And we have a starting list of technology investments that we're seeing comparable cities perform that we really should be getting into and start looking at. The city's website is, it'll be 7 years old here in a few months since we've made any major updates or changes to it. We're not just talking about kind of the graphic look of the website, but delivering a website that meets citizen expectations. Our website does not conform or allow you to really look for information if you're on a mobile device, if you're on a tablet or a smartphone or something like that. It doesn't have a lot of the functionality that consumers and the public is starting to expect from their online interactions with organizations. You can look at Eden Prairie, who launched a new site earlier this spring. The city of Plymouth is about a year old. Apple Valley recently did one. And the investment those cities are making to get that type of site is in the $35,000 neighborhood. Luckily, that's a one-time investment and not an ongoing investment. Paperless council packets. You see them every 2 weeks. They not only go out to council, but all of our boards and commissions. And the world is moving to paperless. But that's going to take an upfront investment as well as some ongoing investment to keep that kind of technology going. Online forms. We still do 100% of our employment applications by paper, and you can come visit my office and see the stacks and stacks and stacks of applications that we receive when we post a job and we get 300 applications. It's not an efficient way to do business, and we can't keep operating with 2 HR people if we're going to keep taking in paper at this rate. We've got to stop, digitize, and then hopefully we can move forward. Another example of online forms is our right-of-way permits. We've been mapping out kind of the steps that a right-of-way permit takes from when it comes into the public to when it actually gets issued. The number of times it gets put into an interoffice envelope and moved from one building to the next building to a staff person to check and back. And then the last technology investment has to do with Wi-Fi. We have an increasing demand, again, from our customers, people that use our buildings and facilities, to have Wi-Fi in our facilities. We currently provide Wi-Fi in some areas of the community center. We have a Wi-Fi in this room that 5 people can be on at once, and we have Wi-Fi in the training room at the police department that I think carries 10 users at once. We've started to get requests and things from our sports associations when they're trying to run tournaments at our parks and as well as requests for better and faster connectivity in those 3 buildings where I just mentioned it. So your Telecommunications Advisory Commission is looking at that issue of providing Wi-Fi to the people that come to our facilities, and what do they expect, what's reasonable for the city to provide, and what might be a funding source to provide for that. So.
In addition to the demands and desires that Chris has talked about from a staff and internal standpoint, we also are aware of 4 fairly major items that you need to consider that will be potential impacts on the city's budget. First, we have an RFP out in effect for potential users, partners at the downtown fire station building. That's going to be back due July 30th. It's possible that someone could come in and decide that they're going to be able to operate this with no city involvement. It's also possible that they may be looking for a partnership and that city would continue to own and operate and ensure that. At this point, we don't know what that is, but it's something that we do need to be aware of in terms of potential costs in the 2013 budget. In addition to that, then there are 3 components that were part of the referendum that was on the ballot a year ago in November. The first is the second sheet of ice. That desire for that additional use certainly has not dropped. Second floor fitness room, we heard earlier this evening about the dry room training for the hockey association. Fitness is another thing which has not been fully able to be offered by the city. And then finally a senior center, whether that's dedicated as a separate facility or something that would be an addendum in addition to the existing community center. That's something that continues to be a need for Shakopee. Those are the needs, the desires. Let's talk about where we are in terms of what's able to be provided. For that, I'm going to turn this over to your Finance Director, Julie Linehan.
We thought it was important when we started putting this information together to just give you a little perspective on where things have been between the levies that the city prepares. As you recall, in September you get a preliminary levy followed up in December by a final levy. And traditionally the city of Shakopee has had the general fund levy, which has, as you can see from about 2007 on, been fairly flat. The EDA levy, which has been actually eliminated one of the years, 2010, and then slightly increased for the last 2, but provides for a community of this size limited funding for EDA purposes. And then the fire station levy under fire station number 1 is actually a voter-approved referendum that the community approved and allowed the taxpayers' approval to levy the full amount of the debt service. Now, as we discussed in last year's budget sessions, those dollars have been decreasing so that you are truly not funding the full levy. A portion of this is coming out of your general fund levy. And you do have the authority to levy, but it has not been fully utilized in the last few years. As you can see, there were periods of growth in the years 2006 through 2009, followed by what is the slightly reduced levies in the past few years. Just a graph kind of giving you a little overview of where you've been as your levy has been allowed to increase in total. What this ties to very closely, as you can see by the levy growth, is the changes and increases in taxable market value in the similar years. You have a consistent pattern of the increase in the levy following the increase in the market change. Where you're going to see the change most significantly is in 2012. Approximately anticipated an 8% decrease in market value. That's what we're going to be dealing with as we work through this budget year. It appears as we look through the history that in the years of market increase, there was a slight increase in levy that allowed for a maintenance of a flat tax rate. That's a council decision. That is oftentimes what is done, but it also doesn't allow you as a community to take advantage of your growth. It maintains your growth, but it doesn't give you the experience to appreciate some levy increases based on growth. So as you can see, another chart, similar to your tax levy, your market value has declined. Now, as we talked about in the earlier discussions of both the audit and we've talked about it in the debt rating, those are factors that are not unusual just to Shakopee. It's happening everywhere. So dealing with market value declines is going to be an issue that every city will be dealing with as they prepare budget work for 2013.
So, given that, you've got the existing operations, what we know we're going to have for expenses. We've got the needs and wants. You've seen your levy history, and you've seen the decline in taxable value. We need to have a discussion, or would like some direction from you in terms of, is this a year for a levy increase? Is that a way to address that? The flip side of that is that we can look at ways to cut expenditures. We've brought those, quite frankly, to previous councils in the past, and there's been a reluctance to do significant things which are going to result in a lot of cases, downsizing of personnel positions. I mean, we can do such things as we can mow the parks half as often, but unless you're going to reduce hours or lay off a position that really doesn't amount to a substantive amount of cash. We can look at things like that, but ask yourself, how serious you are about addressing those sorts of things. So what we need from you is, what do you want us to look at for budget year 2013? How do you want us to spend our time putting those items together for you, so that when you start to look at this in late July and in August, that we've got something that addresses what your needs are, what your wants are, and then your vision for what the pay plan is going to be for this, 2013. With that, I'd stand for any questions that you might have.
Questions? Wow. All right, then I'll ask you what. Did you raise your hand, Mr. Clay?
Yeah, I was waving at you.
You can go.
I thought we'd just kind of start at the top of the list with the day crew for firefighters. As long as he's here, we might get him up to the podium, and he's looking too relaxed back there.
He was preparing.
It's been a few months since we've talked much about the daytime duty crew. Is the need still there that was there 6 months ago, and our daytime responses have been getting better or worse, or staying about the same?
Our daytime response has been the same for the last year and a half. I mean, with the, I guess the declining of our firefighters not being able to respond to calls during the day because of their full-time jobs that are paying their bills, the need is still there, yes.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being fine and 10 being desperate, where are we at there? I'm trying to get a handle on how urgent, because it's a fairly significant.
It is a very significant amount of money. I would put it somewhere around an 8 out of a 1 to 10, if 10 being the worst and 1 being the best.
If I could add, this is not just something that's unique to Shakopee. It's certainly an issue nationwide, but the Scott County Association for Leadership and Efficiency has identified this as something that they're going to be discussing in June, that perhaps something that Prior Lake and other member communities might partner on. There's still some fairly major holes in it right now, but just, it's an issue for us, we know that, but also for neighboring communities as well.
You're on a roll there.
I had another question, but then when Mark started talking, I forgot what it was.
We are looking at this through scale, the service delivery on scale, as to how we can pool services between the county and if it makes sense to pool services. The chief and Mark and I have been talking about that the last week. And hopefully, within the next, I'd say, 2 to 3 months. What do you think about that, Mark? Is that a decent timeline? We'll have at least an idea of what, if anything, can be done from that
If something's going to be
collaboration.
done for 2013, it's going to have to be done within 3 months.
Right.
But as far as where they're going with that, I guess we'll find out more in June.
Right. So we're looking for the ability to collaborate with other towns.
So our current insurance ratings in any immediate
No.
problem?
Not at this point, not that I'm aware of. It's our daytime availability and our response times to our customers.
Anyone else have questions about daytime response firefighters? I didn't see third fire station on the list of needs.
It's in the capital improvement plan, yeah.
For 2014.
14.
It is in the 2014 plan. One of the things that we talked about in November with previous council was the need for that. I think one of the issues that was identified that night was that aside from the $3 million to construct it, by adding a third station, you're also needing to add 20 firefighters and potentially, as I recall, $360,000 a year in operating costs for that. So it's certainly an issue, and we should probably include that in future discussion as we do it. But it is something that, not for 2013, but for 2014. And if we're going to be serious about that, we need to start ramping up in terms of adding staff.
All right.
When?
Yeah, part of the 2013 budget, we'll have to have paid-on-call firefighters added to it. If we're going to build a station, I would venture now would be 2015, because I don't believe we can hire enough daytime response or paid-on-call folks to be ready in 2014, unless we start hiring in 2013. Instead of hiring 5, we hire 10 and bring in a full-time training officer that we can train these folks and get them going, so we can train during the day.
So after 2015, or 16, when we have 3 fire stations, and we went to the daytime duty crew would be covering the
Entire city.
city.
They would cover the entire city during the day until we had an actual structure fire or something that was more, I'll call it confirmed, and then we'd start dumping paging out stations, station paging, I'll call it. So if it's out in Southbridge, our duty crew would start running out that way. We'd page Station 3 out in Southbridge, and they would start coming, and then we could move on from there.
All right, I don't necessarily want to go through each of these positions this evening, or else we'll be here till 2 o'clock in the morning going through everything. I would rather, since we've got the idea of the needs for 2013 as to where we can go, what we can do, I didn't see much on here. You mentioned that there have been cuts proposed in the past, things that we can get rid of, not can get rid of, but things that we could possibly do differently to have savings. What kind of items fit under that category, having not been here through previous discussions?
We had a proposal to privatize all of our custodial services. Two-thirds of that was approved, but we do have a mixed use right now with one individual who is still a city employee, and then we have a contractor for others. That's kind of indicative of some of the issues that you deal with in terms of trying to find ways to make substantive cuts on. So, offhand, what else have we done?
I think one of the big questions on cuts is, in the past, a majority of the council said they weren't interested in cuts that were achieved by eliminating occupied positions. We've cut vacant positions in the past, but last summer the direction was from a majority of the council that they weren't interested in achieving savings if it meant cutting an occupied position. Is that still the parameter that a majority of this council would set for us? You know, we've come up here with lists of things to save money in the past. I mean, we've spent time on downtown flower basket. We've talked about custodial services. We've talked about the staff time put into the Historic Preservation Advisory Commission. But you achieve savings by not having a staff person do that work, and then by having them stay home, whether that means they're a 3/4 time employee instead of a full-time employee, or they're not, you know, or we have, if we're going to mow parks, you know, less frequently, we're going to have fewer people in park maintenance. That's how you save the money. Just not doing the activity doesn't save you any money unless you take the painful step of letting that human being on the other end of that job go. You know, so we kind of need to know what is that acceptable to you for us to be bringing you cuts that require that kind of action? You know,
Well, let's talk about that up here. What from council is our tolerance or ability to make those kinds of decisions? Councilor Lehman.
Well, I've got the tolerance, done it in the past. I'd like to keep the levy as flat as possible.
Well, let's stick to talking about cuts for right now. We'll get to levy in a little bit.
Okay, and then I'd like to differentiate between what is a need and what is nice to have or want. We haven't had a natural resources coordinator. Don't know that we have a need for it. Might be nice to have. I don't know that we have a need for it. Public relations specialist.
All right, let's talk about cuts of current.
I'm cutting some of the things on this screen right here.
We're not talking about the screen right there. We're
Okay.
not talking about the wants and things for the future. What we're talking about is currently where we're at today. If we could save $250,000 by eliminating positions and paying someone else to do a job that private businesses can do more efficiently or better than government, or if there are things that we don't need to be doing that we're currently doing, that we can eliminate those positions. Whatever, if staff has ideas and thoughts and ways to achieve savings by eliminating personnel, are we comfortable not talking specifics, not talking any one specific job? Are we comfortable saying, yes, we can let people go to save taxpayer money?
Yes.
Councilor Whiting.
I think it's important to look at every proposal that's brought forward and not putting a face or a job title on anything. I think we need to look at that and see if there is cost savings. And I personally, I think if I saw the value in it, I could make that decision.
What kind of value would be needed to make that decision?
Well, you'd have to show that it saved a significant portion of money for the city.
And to you, significant is?
Well, I mean, it would. You don't want to replace somebody that knows how to do the job with somebody that for $3,000-4,000 less, who you're going to be paying for the training part of it. It would have to be fairly significant before I'd want to lay anybody off, but it would have to be there. Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Lehman.
Well, it depends how you look at it. I mean, you could take multiple small amounts and eventually a lot of pennies equal $1. So, yeah, I'm open to looking at any way of streamlining, making government more focused on its core priorities that government services that the private sector can't do, and turn some of the services that government does over to the private sector. Yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of that.
Councilor Punt?
I think I've demonstrated over the last couple of years that I'm very supportive of cuts where it makes sense, where we're saving money. To Councilor Lehman's point, where the private sector can better serve and better provide the service than, and where it's not really government's place to be doing that job. I'm very supportive of looking at those things.
Councilor Clay?
And what would be something that we're currently doing that it's not government's job?
I'm running a community center.
Also, you don't include Parks and Recreation as a government thing?
There are portions of it that are appropriate for the government to be responsible for. There's other portions that are inappropriate, in my opinion.
I agree with that.
The inappropriate parts would be the trails. Should we privatize the trails, have toll trails for people to ride their bikes on?
I don't know that we want to
possibly,
get
or-
into a list at this point in time, but I'd be happy to go through that with anyone who's interested.
Yep.
Well,
I would
I've
too.
sat through 5 budgets in this current round of my council experience, and I don't recall ever saying, oh, well, we've got this person that's sitting around doing nothing, but we don't want to lay him off. I mean, we've stretched our employees out pretty thin over the last 5-6 years. If you're looking for fat to trim, I don't see where you're going to find anything significant. Of course, I would be, have to stand corrected as far as the custodian issue we have, but I've been chastised about that enough. But still, even so, we're only talking, what, $30,000 difference. It's not something that's going to make or break the city. If you can, think of some things you want the city to no longer do, fine. Parks and Recreation, I still think that everything that they're doing is important for the city. We value police officers and firefighters for our health and safety, but then seem to neglect the other aspect of health and safety and well-being, that having parks to play in, trails to ride on, places to exercise and play basketball. And, I think those things are just as important as fire protection and police protection.
Councilor Punt?
I think the thing to realize is that people that work in the private sector have continually over the years been asked, been asked to do more with less, and had positions that have been eliminated around them. And, individuals are doing the work of what perhaps 2.5 or 3 people did, a decade ago. So it's very common that people feel overworked and overloaded in their positions. And I'm not sitting here saying it's right, but it's certainly the way that cost savings, operational costs have been decreased in private industry as well.
Which is how we've kept the levy flat,
Mhm.
correct? It's a big way that we've been able to keep that flat since 2009, is expecting a lot more out of staff
Right.
than we did in the past. And the question, I think, is that if we've stretched that so far that we are no longer gaining efficiencies, which I think is where we're at on that, which we'll get to that discussion. Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, I think it does absolutely no good to paint with broad brushes tonight, or at any time on his body.
Duly noted.
Councilor Clay, to your point of anti-parks and recreation is just totally uncalled for and unacceptable. So I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that, because it's not your character, so we'll let it slide.
I don't understand what you mean. I don't either.
Well, you made the comment that, Councilor Punt is against park and recreation, or that's just not the
I
case.
don't believe I said that.
The fact is that, you take items like the soccer and the baseball and these type of little league and hockey, and these little things, these are great community assets, and nobody doubts that. But there are other things within the park and rec umbrella that could be done and have been done better by the private sector. Matter of fact, if we go a little further, the government sector has actually put portions of the private sector out of business with the tax dollars. They compete, and they shouldn't be competing against each other. So there is an opportunity to do things a little bit differently, which helps not only the private side, but the government side.
The question is, should government not be doing what private sector people do, or could we also say that private sector people shouldn't be trying to do what government sector people do?
For the most part, I mean, for the most part, I would say government's real responsibility and role is to do what the private sector cannot do. You cannot call Johnny's Fire Service, my house is on fire. There is no Johnny's Fire Service. You cannot call Frank's Police Service, my house is getting broke into. There is no Frank's Police Service. There are functions that government has to do that the private sector cannot. The government sector has to control, your water supply, your sewer supply, your infrastructure, your electricity, your permitting processes and things like that, your administrative functions, your planning functions, police and fire, public safety. These are all legitimate government responsibilities. There's a lot of things that government does that they shouldn't be doing. And matter of fact, if we look at a larger scale, a lot of these times the government on many levels do things they shouldn't be doing, and it gets them in trouble. And then the whole nation suffers for it.
Okay, we're not going to go there.
So-
Thank you very much. So I think we have general consensus up here that we are willing and able to look at if there are plans or if there are ideas coming from staff for making personnel cuts. It will not be easy for anyone in the room. It will not be easier for anyone up here. But if there are legitimate savings that could be made, we are very willing to look and discuss, and by what we've talked about, hopefully go along with what staff says, staff recommends, I will say. Is that clear? Ms. Wilson?
I think that helps. You kind of echoed it. I wanted to restate, you threw out the idea of $250,000. We've had a flat levy for 4 years, and those easy staff ideas of where we cut and where we save without having a noticeable impact, we've done those. That's how we got to this flat levy for the last, few years. I didn't intend for my comments to suggest that there were, I think if anything, the staffing list should have given you the opposite message, which is in a lot of areas, we're stretched to the max.
Right.
Councilor
Clay.
If I total all these up, it comes to what, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000?
I had $1 million in my head.
Potentially.
Something like that. I'm wondering, could we ask staff to, say what, if council informally at this point, or tentatively committed itself to funding a third of those, or 40% of those, which would staff choose to be the ones they want to tackle?
Councilor Punt.
It seems to me that we'd need to talk a little bit higher level in terms of what the appetite is for a levy increase or not, before we can really address that. So I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share what my perspective is on that. If you want to get
Please
a barometer,
do. Yes,
from everyone. I think we've patted ourselves on the back for keeping the levy dollars flat for the last several years. However, our tax capacity rate percentage has actually increased because of the decrease in the market value. So we're facing the largest decrease in taxable market value that we've seen in in several years, with an over 8% predicted decrease. So keeping the levy dollars flat with that would be actually quite heroic, because your percentage is still going to increase. If we tried to keep it the same percentage of that, about 35%, with that sort of decrease, our levy would decrease pretty substantially. I mean, that would be pretty difficult for us to deal with. With that, I mean, my appetite for increasing the levy is quite low. I would prefer to try to keep the levy dollars flat. I would ideally prefer to try to keep the tax rate percentage flat, but I realize with the 8% decrease, that's going to be very, very challenging.
Okay, Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, we also have the items that we know that we're going to be taking hits on, the overlay, the debt service, which is now going to be changed with the bond issue tonight, but we still haven't seen how that's all going to play out with the other debt, outstanding debt service payments and stuff. However, on a positive note, we carried over $2 million, some of which could go into the capital to help shore up, start on the overlay and debt service and so on and so forth, but that's not probably going to continue, so, it buys maybe 2 years' time or something, but, so it's a positive note in a otherwise gloomy prediction. My concern, as Councilor Punt has pointed out, is I think we really have to think hard about probably the next 12 to 18 months because we don't know a lot of uncertainties of other people, other bodies. October, coming up here shortly, if Congress doesn't do something, they're gonna go off a $7 trillion cliff. And we don't know where they're going to go with that, if they're going to carry it over into the following year because of the elections, or if they're going to fix it somehow. Yeah, hopefully they can fix it somehow, because if they don't, it's $3,500 a person hit. So if we're going to place a $3,500 a year hit on everybody, if they place that hit on everybody, and we place a hit on, we can rest assured the county probably will have to, and the state probably will, and pretty soon we have made the problem much worse trying to fix it, because then you'll have households that just say, can't do it. And now we've got the same problem we had in '08 up to present, starting over again. And it's not much we can do about it, but it's something that we have to think about, because all of them tied together play a role in the end result and the end user. So it's gonna, this is the time where government has to tighten its belt and do its necessities, and,
So are you implying the belt is not currently tight?
We've been pretty good. The numbers are on the screen. We've been doing a pretty good job. I'd like to keep doing that good job.
Absolutely.
Just gets tougher, tougher decisions have to be made. We really got to start focusing, and hopefully things turn around. I can't imagine it's going to stay like this for the next 5 years. I would think that we'll have a better understanding October, when that deadline is, November elections. What's the direction that their country's going? Did they fix some of these problems? Will them fixes trickle down? Or are they going to make it worse for us? That's really what's going to be the telltale. But eventually it'll turn around. Values will start, coming back. Job markets will start opening up.
He's going down the road.
I'm hoping that happens.
All right, Councilor Whiting.
Just not. No, you
I'd like to let you finish.
Oh, really?
Sum it all up, right? No, I understand. I think we got lucky on the underspend of the budget. I think with fuel and different variables, there's just too many variables that could happen where we wouldn't be able to rely on that for very long. My concern here is, as a body, we are the stewards of the city. The street improvement fund and the debt service, I think, is very important. I think we need to get that street fund built up, and the only way we can do that is with a very difficult decision to increase the levy. I think we've gone after all the low-hanging fruit from what I've seen and understand. I'm sure there's always some opportunities there, and we'll hopefully look at them as they come up. But we may have to come to that difficult decision, especially if we want to try and fund, an EDA coordinator, or especially an IT person or something like that. I think, as far as priorities, maybe that would be, from what I know, maybe my priorities on personnel. But I don't see going along the same path, but being able to maintain that flat levy. It's going to be very difficult, but I don't want to have the streets crumbling more than they are. We talked about Van Buren Street. We don't want to have the streets in that condition as stewards of the city. So I feel I could make that difficult decision if it had to come to that.
Councilor Clay.
I'm going to try one more time, as I try every year, to explain how this works. But the tax capacity, the valuation of the city out there isn't the key to what people pay in taxes. The tax rate isn't the key to what pay in taxes. The tax capacity out there and the tax rate don't have anything to do, for the most part, with what people pay in taxes. It's what we as local elected officials budget to spend. We could subtract or lose half of our total market value in the city. Just cut it right in half. If everybody, the city, the county, and the school district levied the same amount of money, you divide that money they levy into the tax base, you'll wind up with a tax rate that's twice as big, and everybody will pay the same amount of money they paid the previous year, even though values were cut in half. And the tax rate doubled, their taxes are going to still be the same. This idea of keeping the tax rate flat from one year to the next doesn't mean anything. It's what we budget to spend that's going to affect people's taxes. And we've been crimping for the last 3 or 4 years, helping our tax-paying citizens, to get by from one year to the next, cutting staff or not filling empty positions and pushing our current staff to, so I think about as far as we can push them. So that after that, the short answer is I'm good for about $500,000 or $600,000 increase in the levy.
Thank you. My position on this, and I've thought a lot about it, as everyone up here has, is that as I've gotten into this role and worked fairly closely with staff and been involved, sometimes much to their chagrin and sometimes positively, with the different projects that have been going on. Just in my short time I've been here so far, I fully believe that staff is stretched to and beyond the limit for what our city staff is able to do efficiently. We are at a point where the funnel is full and we can't stuff anything else in there, which, if my focus is looking 5, 10, 20 years down the road, and for us to be more successful 5, 10, 20 years down the road, we need to invest and do things right now that position us to be more successful as the next economic development wave comes through, and as we continue to grow, so that we are in a good place when we are not a town of 10,000 people like we used to be, but a 55, 60,000 person city. And as we get to that, we need to plan for that right now. And I think that we are pushing our staff to our detriment at this point, and we need to invest in staff and also the infrastructure that we have. I'm not gonna say we've neglected it, but we have pushed off into the future, and also for our city to compete. If you look at some of the amenities that other cities close to us are providing right now, we in order to get people here and keep property values up, in order to sustain that tax level, we need to be able to compete with other towns. And you can look at us compared to Chaska and us compared to Savage and other places. And during the economic downturn, our tax capacity, our housing values and things have lowered more than other towns around us have. And I think that part of that is our competitive edge for simple things like community things, for keeping people here and keeping people engaged, and building that community. So I feel we need to invest in those things, which will take money to get those things done. But coupled with that, I've talked to Julie and Mark and other folks about ways that we can cut. And I'm also willing to, if there are programs or projects that we do, I would like to see a 2% cut in what we do as a city right now and make those hard decisions that will better position us for 5-10 years down the road. And what those cuts are at this point, I don't know what that is. And I look to staff or the experts to tell us what, and it's not just going to be cutting one position or building efficiencies, but if there are programs that we provide as a city that don't necessarily meet the needs of our residents anymore, to get rid of them and to do something different. And I don't know the answers to that, but I want those options to come forward for us. So that's my take on it, is that I'm very willing to look at levy increase, but that has to come with some cuts along with that, however that looks. So, any other discussion items up here? Does that give direction? We have,
No, they only got direction.
Mayor,
for
as
the
I understand,
number.
we've got, would you like a number from us, or would you like the general direction that we're going, and as we get into budget items and those kinds of things, to look at
I
numbers
think
then?
as long as we have an understanding that you're willing to look at everything, including those that will be painful, we can put together a proposed budget that will keep, that will provide an acceptable level of services. What you will need to give us some direction on is the levy. I've heard a couple say that they're looking at keeping the levy flat. I've heard a couple that have indicated that they're willing to increase the levy. What is the consensus of the council, and is that consensus strong enough that in December you're going to be able to stick to that?
It is my understanding from listening to everyone talk, we have 3 council members who are interested in looking at raising the levy. Are willing to raise the level in 2013, and 2 that are interested in keeping the levy flat. Is that correct? Councilor Lehman?
Yeah, I'd like to keep it flat.
Councilor Clay?
I don't know if it's possible, but it'd be nice to shoot for that.
Right. Councilor Clay?
Yeah.
Councilor Whiting? Is that correct?
The possibility of increasing it, yeah, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there any further direction that you'd like from us that we could give you this evening that would make your lives easier?
If you give us some direction in terms of, for the 3 of you who are supportive, or at least would look at an increase, keep in mind every $150,000 to $160,000 is 1% or 1 point increase in the levy. I've heard $500,000. This is again on a $20 million budget. Not all of it is tax levied, but is that the number that you would be looking to support?
I personally cannot answer that. I have not, knowing the budget and having gone through the budget process, I am unable to make a good, educated answer on that at this time.
Okay.
I know that's kind of pushing the decision forward, but I want the decisions that we make, I want to be how do I say this that makes the most sense? The decisions that we make for raising the levy, I want to be clear and for a purpose, for a specific, this position will be hired with the additional money, or this project will get completed for that, so that we're able to prove to the public and the taxpayers, this is why it is happening. This is the reason why your elected officials are making this decision.
We won't be in that position until September 15th, if you want that much clarity.
Which is when we decide.
Preliminary levy.
Right.
I heard Councilmember Whiting, I believe, say that he was looking at, meeting our IT needs, meeting our street infrastructure needs, and possibly an economic development position. If others of you could give us similar general preferences, I mean, we laid out what admittedly is kind of a laundry list of ideas, and staff realizes that. But help us know what's worth further research and further development.
All right, could you go to
And
this-
what we should just let go
three.
now.
Yeah, what would be your top three if you were looking these over?
All right,
Based
could you go back
on-
to the list for me, Mark?
See, I'm thinking that staff has a better handle as to what's most critically needed.
Yeah, I'm guessing here.
Which is why I was
Bring it
more
back.
wanting to just come up with a percentage or a dollar amount and then have you come back to us and say, okay, given that parameter, this is what we feel is most pressing needs for the first year here.
That being said, I am 100% that we need to hire economic development coordinator. I also think we need to address within city staff our ability to communicate with residents, so communication, improving our ability to communicate with residents. Those two things that I am very much in favor of getting done if we're able to get things done, when we're able to get things done. Do you have anything?
Just the infrastructure issues being a priority.
Absolutely. Councilor Lehman?
As far as street improvements? you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Economic Development Coordinator could be contracted consultant on a as-needed basis.
Like we do with engineering?
You may not have the run that you had in the last 6 months of the 3 that just came in.
We're not debating the merits of a position or anything right now. I'm just asking for your opinion. If there's anything on there that you would be willing to raise a levy for, if there are any projects you'd be willing to raise a levy for, just to give direction. If none, that's perfectly fine as well. Just asking the question.
I would be willing to raise the levy for public safety if we couldn't retool it with what we have to meet the needs.
All right?
And just to clarify, infrastructure being a priority, but not with raising the levy.
Got it. Thank you. Any further direction staff would like? This side of the table's been very quiet over here, Mr. Leek and Mr. Loney. Still quiet.
Asked for my input.
They're processing.
Would you have to provide any input?
I think it'd be better if staff were to meet as a team and talk about the ideas that you've put forward this evening before weighing in at all.
Okay. Mr. Loney?
Yeah, I think the purpose of this meeting is to get general ideas. It's not to get specifics.
Right.
We got plenty of time. We're gonna be going through a lot of budget. There's a lot of issues presented tonight.
Exactly.
And don't get hung up on one item or another.
Jamie? Chiefs? All right. That's kind of what I figured, but I want to give you the opportunity. Anyway, Mr. McNeil?
I think that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll entertain.
We really should find room in the budget too for coffee at these meetings.
Couldn't you personally provide that?
Or
Mr.
Jack
Flynn?
Daniels. Or
Just brew it at
All
home
right.
before you come in.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second, if you didn't take me.
Counselor Clay, seconded by Counselor Punt. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Meeting adjourned at 10:10. Thank you much.